across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon to you. Just gone 4 o'clock. We're live across the UK. Welcome to Talk Drive, the home of common sense and free speech. And I'd like to be honest, as I always am, my earpiece is screwed, which means all I can hear in one ear is... I'll do my best. Welcome to the show. The amazing Russell Quirk in just a tick. But what an afternoon. Already, I would say 3 or 4 stories that should get you going. We'd love your involvement on screen right now. How you can be involved in drive time as ever. Jodie, take any calls. 0344 499 1000. Whatever you want to talk about, it's down to you. You can, of course, also use that number on WhatsApp and send a voice note to Ryan, our lanky producer and a top man who I met in Starbucks earlier. He was, I don't know what he was doing in Starbucks. He looked like he was soliciting for a free cake. 0344 499 1000, and you can text the show throughout the next 3 hours, 87222. Do please start your message with the word talk. You might have heard Peter Cardwell talking with Ian about Prime Minister's Question Time. Kemi Badenoch, finally, it seems, coming to the party and doing her best to hold Sir Keir Starmer to task. Yesterday, of course, he made a big announcement. We are taking 2%, 0.2% off the foreign aid budget. We're going to improve the British Armed Forces. All she did was stand up and say, could you please confirm you're going to spend that money on tanks, on troops, on logistical equipment, on drones? We're going to modernise the British Army as the threat from the rest of the world takes shape. He couldn't say. When she then said to him, how much of that money is going to be spent towards this ridiculous idea of giving the Chagos Islands to Mauritius, an ally of China, and apparently we're also giving them 9 billion quid on 3 occasions. Slippery Starmer, 24 hours after he pretended to be a caring, sharing Briton, is showing his true colours. Lying again, me suspects. 0344 499 1000, text to 87222. As if that didn't blow your mind. I mean, we talk about politicians and we talk about box-ticking exercises and we wonder, you know, how many of them actually understand the pulse of the British, I'll underline that, people. Pin back your luggos, peeps. Scotland's First Minister in the last hour, John Swinney, I'm going to call him Swiney, has backed the right of trans people who self-identify as women to use female toilets and changing rooms. He says that they should, in Scotland, be free to choose the facilities they feel most comfortable in. There is no requirement for them to have undergone any medical procedure or to have changed legal gender. Meaning, if Isla Bryson, that rapist, who raped 2 women and who decided halfway through her trial to put on a wig and a pair of leggings and walk out in front of the world's press, and I'm not being rude, and sack me if you want, you could see his lunch box in clear and evidential form, but he was going to be put in a female prison, a man who had raped 2 women. So for all the people who will now go, oh, Jeremy Kyle's not talking about women's rights, you know what? Come and take me on, because I am talking about women's rights. What I want to know is this. For all you people who go, women's rights are important, I agree with you. What about women who don't want men who are pretending to be women in their changing rooms? What about their bloody rights? 0344 499 1000. And just to cap it off, more net zero madness. There's a committee. They're called the Climate Change Committee, made up of a sort of variety of numbskulls that nobody's ever heard of. They are employed by Ed Miliband's dodgy net zero office. They're paid lots of money. They have a huge budget. They've decided that in this quest to make us all be net zero, 1.5 million heat pump installations need to happen every year to 2035. We need to increase car sales, electric sales of cars, all of that. The cost is irrelevant. It's going to screw all of us. But actually, the most important thing is that this net zero aim of this Labour government led by Ed Miliband is apparently front and centre, and we're all going to have to jump to it. I would say that will prove to be almost as unpopular as everything else. What do you make of the net zero thing? On the day, by the way, that BP went green, didn't they? They made this big thing about, oh, we're going to... Today, BP has announced that it will cut its renewable energy investments and instead go back to focusing on oil and gas production. Of course, that's the oil and gas we have under the ground that is actually ours and can provide money and jobs and growth. The world's gone nuts, and as if you think that wasn't enough to cheer about, brilliant news in the last half an hour. Dominic Cummings. Now, a lot of people don't like Dominic Cummings. I'm not telling you on air why I think he's brilliant. He's come out and supported reform. 0344 499 1000. Text to 87322, and we'll throw in a bit of BBC bashing. They're still quite rightly under pressure over that disgusting Gaza documentary that cost you and me, British taxpayers, who are forced to give the BBC 170 quid a year, £400,000. We say a very good afternoon to a man in an ill-fitting jacket. Russell Quirk.
It's a double-breasted jacket.
It's too short.
I'm not sure
I
I'm allowed to say
apologise. The sound in my ear is so appalling. Do I sound as tinny as I think I sound?
Do you want me just to do the talking then, or...?
Yeah, you do the talking. Okay. Let's start with the Chagos Fury. Good for Kemi Badenoch asking the question.
Do you think... I have to disagree. I think she is very unimpressive still, Badenoch. I watched PMQs
Well, forget
today.
whether she's unimpressive. She's asked the question that matters.
Well,
Slide me
yeah,
Starmer.
But she asked the question, having read it from a sheet, and we've all criticised Keir Starmer over the last few weeks for the fact that every speech he makes, he can only read from a sheet. I mean, where's the passion, where's the conviction in these politicians? I mean, the only conviction we see in politicians is when they are convicted, like Mike Ainsbury.
I love what you did there.
Did you see that?
Yeah, it was good.
So I don't think she's that impressive. She did ask the same question over and over again. She wasted her 6 questions. Now, it's a valid question. And, of course, the question we're asking, as you've just asked, is, OK, you're now saying that the defence budget is being increased to 2.5% of GDP. It's about 13 billion quid. Great. Does that include certain things? So, for instance, all this money that we are unnecessarily giving to Mauritius for the Chagos Island.
Yes.
Does it perhaps also include, I don't know, a bit of sleight of hand? I mean, would we put that past Keir Starmer? Probably not. What about military pension contributions? What about pay rises and so on?
Yeah, let's talk about veterans. I came out of the tube station today at London Bridge and there was a veterans there. We don't look after our veterans at all. We should make absolute allowances out of that money for our veterans.
Let's put it like this. We have lots and lots of homeless veterans, about 2,000 on the streets, 0 homeless asylum seekers. Wow. There you go.
So he's under pressure to say where that money will come. And I also found overnight, after we came off air, when he promised to take GDP to 2.5 and it was 13 billion, he's only getting 6 billion by the decrease, of course, from the foreign aid budget. So where's the rest coming from? Taxation.
And that's
taxation.
And I tweeted yesterday, what a great thing to do, until you realise it's actually a reform policy.
And Richard Tice said this morning online.
From 18 months ago.
Richard Tice said we were called far-right
And
thugs.
I think even Kemi Badenoch goaded him into this yesterday. So it's a good move, but is it a move in terms of it having authenticity? That is the question. And the trouble is, when your Prime Minister has fallen for, having a rather distant relationship with the truth, let's be honest, when then someone tries to pin him on certain very clear and very important questions, and he won't just say yes or no, forgive us for thinking that he's being slippery.
Hello to Gary Mitchell. He says, Jezza, that random irritating noise in your left ear is a recording of Keir bloody Starmer.
I was going to say it's me, it's Russell Quirk.
I love that. Now let's talk about John Swinney. I know it's Swinney.
Silly Swinney.
Again, and I made it quite clear in my introduction, which I didn't read any notes from, by the way. Can I just point out? I just want to make that point, Kemi. Why do we have politicians? You're quite right. Who feel the need to read a script?
People often say to me about auto cues and scripts at talk. Can I just say I've never seen an auto cue or a script at talk.
No, well,
there isn't one.
You'll see they do this. If you're looking. John Swinney is the new First Minister. He replaced the hugely unsuccessful Humza Useless, who replaced the very manly Nicola Sturgeon. Let's not go there. But John Swinney has sort of kept his head down. But today's come out and backed the right of trans people who self-identify as women to use female toilets and changing rooms. And I want to put to you what I just put to the audience. And I'd love your response, people, please. 0344 499 1000. I get lambasted and have done in the past by people that we both know who say, this is about women's rights, it's about equality, it's about women's rights. Why do women's rights go out the window from activists when the trans argument starts? I absolutely am not getting into a debate whether somebody can transition or not. But listen, Donald Trump says there's men and there's women. Plenty of people think that. I actually believe the same.
He's mandated.
Yes, he's mandated. But we have a situation now where the Scottish Government is saying if you identify as a woman, not physically, you haven't taken any drugs, you haven't anything lopped off or added on or whatever, I'm not getting involved.
Yeah.
That's all right for you to go and use a female toilet. So I want to turn it round. What about females in Scotland who are not comfortable about women's rights being impinged in this way?
It does not seem that Silly Swinney has learnt the lessons of Nicola Sturgeon.
No.
His predecessor's predecessor, who effectively lost power and ended up in a whole world of hurt in terms of then the SNP being looked into. I'll go no further because I don't think there's been a conclusion necessarily to all of these shenanigans.
I wonder where the
shenanigans of the SNP.
Mobile home is parked.
Yes.
Say no more.
Now, of course, famously, Nicola Sturgeon pursued exactly this policy, but with regard to not just just bathrooms but prisons. John Swinney, I would have to say to him, look, if you accept and you advance this ridiculous argument that you can put a wig on and call yourself Jemima Kyle instead of Jeremy Kyle, and you can then wander into bathrooms and toilets with my daughters changing, for instance. And by the way, I checked, John Swinney is a father, and I'm surprised about that, because if you're a father, particularly of daughters like you and I, you would never countenance this ridiculous policy at all. I do not want a man in a wig with a penis showing in the same changing room as my 15 and 16
and this is my argument.
Not that hard
and this
to
is
accept.
I wish we could get the photograph. That was my argument about Isla Bryson, that story from a year ago.
Yes.
Halfway through a trial where a male rapist raping 2 women was found guilty. He dons a wig and a pair of leggings, comes out. You can see what's on show. That is an absolute red flag for female security.
But the worst thing about this, and look, we could have this, and we often do on this channel, this kind of deep intellectual conversation about trans and what is trans and to what extent and so on. This is not someone that's post-op. This is not somebody that's gone through the process. I mean, you can, I think, for a £5 get a self-identification certificate and decide literally on a Wednesday after a Tuesday that you're female. So the sinister thing here is that it will be abused exactly like it was abused by Isla Bryson and many, many others. There are lots and lots of currently, you know, men rapists, men that have raped women that are, you know, that now identify as women because they want to go into women's prisons to get an easier time.
I completely agree. Matthew from Cheltenham says, just so we're clear, you, me, Russell and the 14 people listening, if I walk into a woman's changing room in a suit, I will be arrested. But if I walk into the same changing room in a dress, slap on some makeup and wear a wig, it's good. The world's gone stark raving bonkers. John Swinney is nuts. I agree with Matthew and Cheltenham. Swinney, this will be his downfall, like it was, because it's this box-ticking rubbish, and then he said the wrong word, which ignores the reality and the truth of what people want.
And the fact of the matter is, you know, you can still, despite the fact there's been a referendum in Scotland which failed in terms of its quest for independence, you can still support the premise of independence in Scotland and not think that women have penises.
I completely agree. We'll go from penises to Gary Lineker. There's no
link there.
Well, there's no link there at all at 4:15. This is breaking news, and I'd like your response straight away. I love the fact that on Drive Time we get breaking news all the time. Gary Lineker has just criticised the BBC for pulling its controversial Gaza documentary. The departing Match of the Day presenter was among 500 TV industry figures to sign a letter accusing the corporation of bowing to censorship and racism. The BBC removed the documentary Gaza How to Survive a War Zone from iPlayer early this week after it emerged that it prominently featured the son of a Hamas official and had paid £400,000 to the company. This is a surprise. The letter, whose signatories included, of course, Miriam Margolis, the actress, Anita Rani, the country-file presenter, as well as 9 BBC staff,
David
argued
Tennant,
the film
Hugh Grant,
was
Emma
an
Thompson.
essential piece of journalism.
Yeah. So I think, in fact, let me ask a question. Do we think that Gary Lineker, in his kind of ever-accelerating journey into irrelevance and oblivion, is now just trying to say things for the sake of getting attention? And also, can anyone point me to a tweet that's been put out there by Gary Lineker in support of the Jews that were killed and were kidnapped on October the 7th a couple of years ago?
Well, it's really interesting today.
Was he vocal about that?
No, not at all. And this is just, again, this is virtue signalling from popular, or what they believe they're popular people. But this goes further, this Gaza documentary. We were talking about earlier in the week, the BBC, we need to do a bit of due diligence into the production company that made it. We didn't know it was going to be the son of a Hamas official. But you didn't do that before. And you won't call Hamas a terrorist organisation. And now it turns out that you changed some of the language within the context of that programme to suit the propaganda that programme was. And if you disagree, I'd love to hear from you. I think, honestly, and I bring it back, as I always try and do on this show, we are forced to pay £172,000. Here's the thing that you and I just did a show earlier with Mike Plank of the Week. You get arrested in this country if you fund terrorism.
Yeah.
Are we funding terrorism by paying our TV licence because some of that money was put towards what we believe was a Hamas propaganda TV programme.
If it is proven, and let's be clear, I don't think it has been proven yet, only because the BBC and the production company, what are they called? We talked about this earlier.
Yo-Yo.
Yo-Yo sounds like a woke yogurt, doesn't it? But anyway, whatever the production company is called, they have been asked very, very clearly if either the BBC or the production company spent money, gave money to Hamas. That should be a very, very easy question to know the answer to and to reveal. But of course, they have been silent. So at the moment, we don't know. However, if the BBC are complicit in giving money to a terrorist organisation, someone should not only be fired, and I would suggest at very, very high level, Director General Tim Davie, but also prosecuted. It's a criminal offence. Someone has to be held accountable. Now, as we talked about earlier on, Jeremy, you and I, I'm afraid the words BBC and accountable don't often appear in the same sentence. But that's the problem with the BBC. There's no accountability.
Completely agree. So we've got the Chagos fury. What Starmer spending his increase in money on? Is it actually going to be soldiers? We've got the First Minister of Scotland, who now thinks if you just go, I'm a bird, I'm a woman, I'm a lady, I can go into a female toilet. Don't think that's safe. Fathers of two daughters, every right to say that. The BBC now being criticised by Gary Lineker, who says you're being anti-Gaza and you know, pro-Israel. Extraordinary. And then just to cap it all off for a Wednesday, Russ, net zero madness. We were talking about this with Mike earlier. The Climate Change Committee have said that everybody needs to get a pump. Have you got those figures from earlier? This is really interesting, peeps, right? This climate committee is part of Ed Miliband's, you know, net zero department. Ed Miliband, I think, is an incredibly scary man who wants to cost us all. I mean, do you remember, we're going to drop your energy bills by £300? They've gone through the bleeding roof because of these ideas.
So let's just accept for a second that the whole quest for net zero is pointless, particularly as we know that the likes of China, India and the United States are continuing to increase their output, increase their use of fossil fuels. So even if we get to zero, as is the quest here, it will make no difference in the global scheme of things. But despite that, we now have a committee, very well funded, as you say, run by people that may or may not have the right qualifications. In fact, I think earlier on I saw a spokesperson for this crime. Yes, it is. Crime Committee, there you go, who has no climate qualification whatsoever, apart from having a degree in classics at Oxford. And she was talking about the following goals. Okay, let me just run through these quickly.
Yeah.
Okay, so currently the amount of households in Britain that have a heat pump is
4%.
1%.
1%.
The goal in just 15 years is to get to 52%.
What, by making it the law?
I don't know, but it's one way or the other. It's ridiculous. So let's be clear. Half the households in Britain, there's about 23 million households in Britain. So what's that? 12 million homes. They're going to have to rip out their gas central heating boilers, fit a heat pump, which doesn't work, by the way. They're also very noisy. There aren't enough heat pumps to go around. There isn't the labour or the individuals around to fit those in that period of time. But wait for this as well. This is even more ridiculous. The number of people that drive electric cars, 2.8% of all cars are electric. The increase that we did have in electric cars has now plateaued. Why? Because a lot of the subsidies have been taken back, and frankly, the public just don't like them because they blow up, because they're really hard to insure. They depreciate really, really heavily. So only 2.8% of Britons have an electric car. Guess what the target is in 2040?
I know the answer to this. Tell them.
80%.
It's just unbelievable.
It's mindless nonsense.
It is mindless nonsense.
And utterly unachievable. This committee, I mean, they may as well be dressed in big shoes and red noses and ginger curly wigs.
Well, they'll be able to identify as women. Listen, loads to get your teeth in today. Quirky, brilliant. Chagos, is that what the increase in defence spending, 2.5 GDP, is all about? It's Slimy Starmer on another one. The SNP leader, John Swiney, we're calling him, he's going down the Nicola Sturgeon route. It's all right to say I'm a woman and go into a female toilet. Not in my world as a father of teenage daughters, absolutely not. Gary Lineker and Miriam Margolis and Anita Rani, amongst television famous people who have come out and said the BBC was wrong to cut their documentary Gaza living in a war zone. It's not fair. The Israelis won't let people in. The Israelis are awful. No mention of the Jews being massacred. Not at all by all the politically correct people. And of course, if that wasn't mad enough, net zero madness. We're going to rip your heating system out. We're going to steal your car. We're going to do all of that whilst your energy bills go through the roof. But the best bit to finish it on, BP, the Green leaders who talked all about this, have today gone, hey, we've woken up to this BS. We're going back to oil and gas because it's underneath the ground.
Little ripple of applause for BP, I think.
Russell Quirk, you're a legend. Thank you very much indeed. It's 4:20. This might be an extended break on Talk Drive because I've done the first 20 minutes listening to what sounds like a rat doing something in my ear. Can they change the microphone? We'll see. 0344 499 1000. Back in about 73 minutes. Ta-ra.
So NHS bosses have said don't get this online, you've got to be doing this under the care of a doctor who's seen you directly. But also they're saying you shouldn't take these jabs unless you really need them. So there's that trade-off of there may be adverse effects, but the impact of your obesity is such that has a big adverse effect. But I know a lot of people who, frankly, have got a little bit of a tummy and don't want to just give up, the odd donut or slice of pizza, who are using these drugs. That can't be a good thing.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, I feel like rejuvenation. 4:25. We're live across the United Kingdom. It's new. Peter Cardwell, I've got a new earpiece. Look.
Very exciting. Excellent. The old man can hear.
Why do you do this? You're giving me a complex about how old I actually am.
Well, aren't you 59?
I'm 60 in July.
Okay.
This is the time at which you say you don't look it.
You don't look it. You look 65. Ha. No, you're a young
well
man.
done on the show last week, it says to say. Before you start whining on in your politically nerd way, are you happy to join me on a call? Let's go to Glasgow. Lorna, you're on Talk Drive. A very good afternoon to you. How are you?
I'm okay, thanks. How are you?
I'm not too bad, no. I want to talk to you about your First Minister, who's barking mad unless you're going to rip my head off. So can I just tell people who are just tuning into Drive Time, just before we came on air, Scotland's First Minister, John Swiney, as I'm calling, has now gone down the Nicola Sturgeon route and has backed the right of trans people who self-identify as women to use female toilets and changing rooms. You don't need to have gone through any transition. You need to just say, I've decided I'm going to be a woman. I would just like to say to you, Lorna, and people will have a go at me, I am the father of teenage daughters. I am totally with Russell Quirk on this. I don't want a bloke with a penis in a changing room with my daughter. What's wrong with that?
No, I don't want that either, Jeremy. It makes me sick to my stomach. I've got a 16-year-old daughter, and the thought of her going into a changing room, she goes to the gym with her friends, and I've warned her, if any man comes into your changing room, just walk out.
The thing is, as well, is that John Swinney has said that people who identify as a different sex should use the changing room or the toilet that they feel most comfortable in. What about the people who are also using the changing room or the toilet that they don't feel comfortable with someone who is biologically a man or biologically a woman? They may not feel comfortable. What are their rights?
And I want to put this to both you, Lorna, and you, Pete, right? We all know people, I know them, who go on all the time, and actually quite rightly sometimes, about women's rights. What surprises me when we get involved in this trans argument is those very people don't give a toss about female rights. We're talking about young girls and women feeling uncomfortable about men with a penis changing or coming into a toilet. Why does any consideration about female rights go out the window? That's what I don't get, Lorna. Do you not agree with me on that?
Yeah, absolutely. As long as they're okay, nobody thinks for a minute about the girls, young girls or the women that are in these changing rooms or toilets, how they feel when they see somebody that's obviously a man coming in to the toilet or the changing room. My daughter's primary school, I won't name the school, but they brought in gender neutral toilets, and my wee girl was coming home every day bursting for the toilet because she refused to use the toilet because the boys were keeking over the cubicles, they were keeking under the cubicles. It was a nightmare.
There are many schools that happens in, and there have been actual medical problems that have existed, that have grown in young children and teenage children as well, because they don't want to use gender. They're essentially not going to the loo when they should.
It's absolutely outrageous. And John Swinney thinks that this is the right way to support his country. Lorna in Glasgow, really, really appreciate your call. Thank you very much indeed. Summing it up, there's four main things I want to talk to you about. We've talked about Swinney. I mean, what is he thinking? What is this obsession with madness?
Well, it's also what brought down, not his predecessor, but one Nicola Sturgeon in regard to this issue. And I
remember being on air with you when that Isla Bryson photo came out. I know you even being shocked by me saying, you can see his penis through those leggings. No.
It's true, though.
This is a male
Yeah.
rapist who
Yeah.
raped 2 women, donning a wig and a pair of tight trousers and saying, I'm a woman all of a sudden. And they're going to put him in a female prison. It's ridiculous.
The SNP tied themselves up in knots about this. They should have just been really straightforward on this and realised that, look, not every trans person is dangerous. No. I don't want to make life more difficult for people who already have quite a tough time being trans people. That is not
Nobody wants
not an
that,
easy
but
life.
you need to consider both sides of the argument.
Of course you do. And you're not a transphobe and you're not necessarily against trans people if you say, hold on a second here, let's have a sensible solution.
Absolutely agree. Listen, you were covering Prime Minister's Question Times. You were in, I know, with Julia and Ian earlier.
Yeah.
Russell Quirk doesn't think that Kemi Badenoch performed very well, but what she did do, we'll let you know in a sec. Starmer yesterday gave the big I am. We've got all this extra money, 13.4 billion for defence increases, and you know the truth is I'm going to do this by cutting the foreign aid budget. Mike and I spent half an hour saying, but I thought you said in a tweet in 2021 the Tories were horrendous human beings to starve all these people, you and Rayner. But you've done it now. Turns out that cut will only give them about 6 billion quid. But today Kemi Badenoch saying, can you tell us how much of that is going to be spent on tanks and drones and logistics and soldiers and fatigues and all that? No, of course they don't know. And turns out that this money we're giving with the Chagos Islands to Mauritius, China's ally of 9 billion, some of it, he refuses to deny it. The man's as slippery as anything.
Also, he doesn't know yet.
He doesn't know. Well, he
doesn't know where the money's going to come from to pay Mauritius. He says the 18 billion figure is wrong. He says that that's wild speculation.
Why are we giving money to Mauritius and land? Why are we doing that?
I don't think we should, and I think this is mad. And you know, from a security perspective as well, it's totally mad. Diego Garcia is a security, a very, very important issue, and the Mauritians are basically in bed with the Chinese, and we need to be really careful about that. But some mad judge somewhere along the way in the International Court of Justice, which is very little. I don't think we should listen to it too often, although we do. Has said that this should happen, and Keir Starmer says, "Okay, let's do it then."
It's extraordinary. Net zero madness. We were doing Plank of the Week, and we were talking about this climate change committee, which is set up inside Ed Miliband's office, of course, and is funded and led by a lady who's got a classics degree from Oxford. I'm not sure what. Yeah, absolutely brilliant.
Great preparation.
They want us all to have heat pumps. They want us all to buy electric cars. They promised to lower our energy bills, and today or last week, yesterday, whenever, our bills have gone up yet again.
Yes, they have.
This is an absolute. On the day that BP, who led the green change and have now announced, no, that's a load of old tripe, by the way, we're going back to oil and gas digging. The Labour Party are so obsessed ideologically with this idea. It is not popular with anybody, but it started under the Tories, Pete.
Go woke, go broke. And they're also speaking outside of, from both sides of their mouth, because you have Heidi Alexander, who's the Transport Secretary, saying, oh yes, build another runway at Gatwick. Fair enough, I'm very happy with that. Build another runway at Heathrow, which Ed Miliband says he's in favour of. It'll bring the growth that the Labour government apparently wants. But the fact is that if you go down this route, net zero is incredibly expensive, and it is absolute nonsense to say that. But they may go down in like 50 years' time, maybe.
Not bothered, I'll be dead.
Well, exactly, and I won't. And then they have.
Well, you will. How old are you?
40. I plan to live more than 90.
You're not going to live till 90. Look at you, man. Look at you, man. You're not
harsh.
No, come on, man. You're not the healthiest looking individual.
You think I'm going to die by 90?
I should think you could be dead by 75, looking at you, if I'm honest.
Thanks for that.
Just being honest.
Good to know.
How old do you think I'll last? I'm about 62 at this rate.
I don't know, not much longer if you keep going down this road. I would say, I don't know.
Scary.
You're eternal, Jeremy. You will have eternal life, I would imagine.
Can you crack on?
No.
Okay. This obsession, though, on a serious note with net zero is, again, you think to yourself, you get elected, you get this large majority, you might have ideology, but are you actually listening to the British people? And you know all those people, the lefties who go, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, but actually, British people are really waking up to the fact that net zero is a waste of money.
Where's the money going to come from? This is my point.
Yeah.
Right, heat pump, 20 grand. Electric car, 30 grand-ish. And it depreciates, as Russell was saying, as soon as you drive it off the forecourt, you can't sell it, basically. So why on earth are people going to buy these cars?
Not.
And then they're going to be forced to, and then they're going to basically banjacks the market. It's going to be... It's just a disaster. It doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make ideological sense. It doesn't make practical sense.
If you thought that wasn't the... Oh, hold on a second. What a voice note. Do you want to share this? Tony on net zero, go.
You know, my blood is boiling with all this net zero rubbish. We've got Ed Miliband. The guy's absolutely crazy, pushing this EV down our throats. I've seen things floating down the Thames that's got more intelligent than that guy. What is he trying to do? pushing heat pumps, EVs nobody wants. It's like a prohibition. Look what happened in America with the prohibition on alcohol. Look what happened there. And it's happening here. Nobody wants this rubbish.
And that's the point, isn't it? I don't believe a majority of the United Kingdom electorate to have any interest in heat pumps or electric cars. And if you nail your colours to that mast, what happens? Ridiculous.
Well, I think this is a major ideological shift. It's also a big economic shift. I think most people, not everybody, but most people want to do their little bit. Okay, they're happy to recycle stuff. They're happy to.
I'm not. I'm sick of recycling stuff. I want to put it all in one bin, and I want the bin men to turn up, and then I want to have another takeaway and watch match. No, I don't want to match of the day because I hate the BBC. But I know I'm sick of being told what to do. Sod off.
Yeah, well, that's what Ed Miliband wants us to do. He wants to change so many different aspects, and he's got resistance even within the Labour government.
If you thought that wasn't great, Chagos Fury, the SNP backing trans rights and net zero madness, I was given the princely present that I always am about 4:15. Gary Lineker's come out. Gary Lineker has criticised the BBC. 500 TV industry figures have signed a letter accusing the corporation of bowing to censorship and racism because the BBC, of course, has removed the documentary Gaza, How to Survive a War Zone. Somebody here said maybe Lineker probably thought it was a documentary about Gaza. Very good. I was away last week, you were here. This turned out to be given to an independent production company by a major corporation, the BBC. They handed them £400,000. They made this documentary. It was voiced by a 13-year-old boy through his eyes, living. It turns out he was the son of a Hamas official.
That's right.
Turns out today, not only was there video footage yesterday of a cameraman from the BBC celebrating
the 7th of October,
7th of October, but also today, which I find this equally frightening, is that there seems to be proof that certain certain parts of the manuscript were changed to promote the message.
The subtitles were changed.
Yeah,
so they said,
to promote the message.
Yeah, they said we want death to Israel and we want to kill the Jews, and they changed that to taking out the word jihad, taking out the word Jews and changing it to Israeli. This is censorship.
This is propaganda. This is bloody propaganda paid for by the British public. And Lineker and all those do-gooders, right? They jump on board. I don't get it.
Lo and behold, as night follows day, you have many industry people like Gary Lineker who, people say maybe the BBC is a bit biased towards the Palestinians. I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that. And then, lo and behold, as night follows day, along comes Gary Lineker and useful idiots like Miriam Margolyes or whatever her name is.
You can't even say it.
I can't say it. Well, you couldn't either. Miriam Margolyes, who then say, actually, this is censorship, this is dreadful, da-da-da-da. It's not, okay? There are editorial standards within the BBC that are meant to be. They said, they did massive, we covered this all last week, massive flip-flops in their different statements at different times. They said we full editorial control. You don't. Right. Let's put the shoe on the other foot just for a second, right? Imagine there was a documentary about life in Israel, and we weren't told that it was voiced by and essentially presented by the son of a Netanyahu minister, right? And we weren't told that. Can you imagine what these people would have said?
Absolutely with you.
Ban it, get it off iPlayer, this is ridiculous. The fact is, the BBC, on a very basic level, forget the argument just for a second about Gaza, Israel and everything that's going on there. On a very fundamentally basic level, the BBC has massively screwed up here.
They're biased.
Their editorial, well,
they're biased.
You're right, but that's almost a secondary consideration because the very basic things that they should have done to make sure that this was done fairly, accurately and was a good use of licence fee payers' money, that wasn't done. And then you have the whole other argument, which is a really big argument about the fact that you have a Hamas terrorist's son who's involved with this, a cameraman who was apparently celebrating the 7th of October and the horrendous attack that happened there. This is a huge mistake from the BBC. People like Gary Lineker need to shut up, sit down and be quiet because they don't understand what they're talking about.
You've heard it here. I've never heard her so formal. I've never heard you so stroppy.
And these 500 people are all completely wrong. They need to sit down, they need to shut up, and they need to know that on a basic level of accuracy and editorial standards, this is wrong. And in terms of the argument, in terms of the bias that is so clear here, they're totally wrong as well.
Loving your work. You got so angry, you got dribble on your chin. 0344 499 1000. That's the telephone number for Talk Drive. It's the home of common sense. It's the home of free speech. And the main man, Mike Graham, is next on Drive.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. 21 minutes to 5 o'clock. We're live across the UK. The main man, he works from 6 in the morning till 10. He makes plank of the week. He's telling you how you can win 25 grand, and he's backing up his mate on drive time. A very, 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 very good afternoon to Michael Graham. Have you ever heard Peter Carbo so angry?
I never have. I mean, he's really absolutely going for it, isn't he?
But he's spot on.
Absolutely right. I mean, these idiots who think that they know about journalism. You know, the idea that Gary Lineker is going to tell anyone, oh, this is a really important piece of journalism. Is it, Gary? What would you know about it? And Miriam Margolyes, who's actually Jewish, but also anti-Semitic, bizarrely at the same time, who doesn't like the Israeli government, doesn't like Israel, wants to stick up for the people of Gaza. You know, these people changed the meaning of words. They actually altered the subtitles to make them represent something that wasn't said.
Let me read this to everybody.
That is not journalism.
It's been revealed on 5 occasions the words Yehuda, Yehudi, which is Arabic for Jew or Jews, were changed to Israel or Israeli forces, or removed from the subtitles altogether. An interviewee praising Yahya Sinwar, the Hamas leader for jihadi against the Jews, was also mistranslated as saying he was fighting Israeli forces. Right. This is on the back, by the way, just in case you've just tuned in. 500 industry figures, headed by Gary Lineker, have signed a letter accusing the BBC of bowing to censorship and racism and not allowing free speech. We'll go to London. Ian, you're on Talk Drive. Mike Graham's with me. What you got?
What have I got? I'll tell you something. I would love to get hold of Lineker and go and get him to sit in front of, the guy, Bibas, who's like Bibas, the person that came back out of Gaza, and say to him what he thinks of him.
Mate,
because the guy is absolutely, I would like to, what I can say, I'll tell you something, but Miriam Margolyes, Mike, in the background, you've got her into a T. She hates it all. There is nothing worse in my life, right, to find a Jew that hates Jews, and she does.
Are you Jewish, sir? Are you Jewish,
yes.
sir? And just to explain, from a Jewish point of view, and we've been incredibly, I think, correctly supported the Jewish situation, there are things I don't like about Gaza, but this is blatant Hamas propaganda. This is the state broadcaster giving 400 grand to a production company and a company that is actually anti-Jewish. That's factual if you watch the programme, isn't it?
It is, but it's like everything. It's like when I said to you a couple of weeks ago when they did these marches, and they don't go to the Israeli embassy, they go outside synagogues. So now please tell me, if you've got a gripe against the Israeli government, you go to the embassy. You don't go to Jewish synagogues. If we start going to mosques or anything else like that, or to churches, the Met Police, under Mr. Khan's orders, would come down on us like a tin of
ton of bricks.
You know what I mean?
Ian, he's right. Mikey's right, isn't he? Ian, thank you. He's absolutely right.
Well, just remember what happened during the riots after what happened in Southport. You know, basically people were locked up for a very, very long time because they were supposedly threatening the Muslim community by making out that they wanted to attack mosques. These people go and demonstrate outside synagogues on the Sabbath, on a Saturday, when they know people want to go and do their praying for whatever it is that they want to pray for. It's disgusting. And as I say, Gary Lineker, again, you know, the idea that they're referring in the letter they write to the fact that, you know, it's wrong to conflate the boy's father because he was an agricultural minister for Hamas and he wasn't a terrorist. Do me a favour.
They're a terrorist organisation.
In Hamas is a terrorist, OK? It doesn't matter what job you do.
You're a
no,
terrorist
Hamas are the government of Gaza, right?
Yeah.
They were voted in by the people of Gaza. They haven't had an election since they were voted in 2005 because they are a terrorist organisation that run it with a rod of steel. If you are a miscreant in Gaza, they push you off a building. If you're a homosexual in Gaza, they push you off a building. These are the people Gary Lineker says have been somehow damaged by having their BBC propaganda pulled from the BBC iPlayer. It's disgusting.
Absolutely agree with you. 0344 499 1000. So much to go on about today.
Yes.
Most of which we covered in the amazing plank of the week.
Yes.
Drops on when? When does it drop?
Friday, 7 p.m.
It's worth the watch, if only to find out about Steve Denier's trip to Bogota. Yesterday, Slimy Starmer, stood up and said, "I'm taking money from the." We did it yesterday from the foreign aid budget. Yes. I'm going to do it. Today, he was questioned by Kemi Beard. Not much enthusiasm for how she did it. Read it, wasn't very passionate, but she kept saying to him, "Can you tell us what the money's going to be spent on?" Yeah. And he couldn't deny that some part, or maybe all of it, was going to be used as money to give to Mauritius when we're giving them a check. Exactly right. Has he done it again within 24 hours, lied through his teeth?
I think not only has he lied through his teeth, but he's also dropped himself slightly in the dark blue stuff, or the dark brown stuff, if you prefer.
Dark blue stuff? What's that?
Well, sort of deep blue sky thinking, all of that.
I think just poo would be.
Probably we should say that. Poo, because apparently the Trump White House has not reacted well to this, because Trump has said, quite frankly, this money that you're going to spend on defence has to be spent on defence. It can't be spent on giving money to another country. It can't be spent on giving money to Ukraine. He also wants Diego Garcia to remain part of a British protectorate, doesn't trust the Mauritians, and why would you? I've got a friend of mine who's from Mauritius, and he said, I would not give money to the Mauritian government. They are corrupt. If you give them money, it will all end up in a Swiss bank account, and there'll be a couple of nice big houses on the Côte d'Azur that they buy for their retirement.
That's the way you do that, Côte d'Azur.
The Côte d'Azur. But that's the problem. You know, Starmer cannot lie straight in bed, because the problem is he has no guiding principles. He doesn't really have... Everybody knows why he came out yesterday and said he was going to spend more money on defence.
Strong-armed by Donald Trump.
Because Donald Trump is now in charge of him. Yeah. He's like Donald Trump's...
Bitch.
I've said it. You've said it. I was going to say gimp, but the same thing. You know, go get us the gimp.
No need for a mask.
You know, gimp's sleeping. Just wake him up, man. You know, and he's in charge of our foreign policy, he's in charge of our defence policy, and he's going to give old Keir Starmer a bit of a spanking, I think, when he arrives tomorrow. And he's going to tell him, you cannot spend defence money on a bribe to another country.
It's extraordinary. What do you make of that? What do you make of Gary Lineker? And what do you make Mike Graham of the SNP leader, John Swinney, who this afternoon has gone down the same route as that revolting Nicola Sturgeon and Hamza Eustace by saying, and I quote, "I back the rights of trans people to self-identify as women using female toilets and changing rooms." I just thought Russell Quirk actually nailed it when he said, "Jez, you and I are the fathers of teenage daughters. I don't want my daughter in a changing room where a man with a penis and a wig and a skirt comes in to change or have a wee." And I don't think, for all the people who are going to jump up and down and say, "I'm not anti-trans at all," I'm not at all. What I'm anti is the fact that any view about women's rights goes out the bleeding door when we get ensconced in this argument. It's fundamentally wrong. What's wrong with Swinney? He's a nutter as well, isn't he?
He clearly hasn't learned anything, has he, from the demise of Nicola Sturgeon. She was considered to be one of the kind of foremost women leaders of the world, a bit like old Jacinda Ardern, you know, don't talk to your neighbours during COVID, right? And Nicola Sturgeon completely kiboshed her own career. And you remember that interview she did with ITV, where you could see the blood sort of draining from her face as she actually admitted, well, yes, there are circumstances under which trans women are not women, like, for example, when you put them in prison. And so Swinney has fallen for it, and he's made a complete and utter blunder, because he's obviously trying to assuage the very noisy but tiny minority of people in Scotland who think that way, who think that trans women with, male appendages are in fact women. They're not women. Let's not pretend they are.
It's really interesting as well when you say assuage a small minority. I'm going to go to a break, text calls afterwards. You know, for me, real politicians, and you go back to Thatcher and maybe Blair, out of credit, they don't give a toss what anybody else thinks. They're not out to assuage. They've got a plan, like it or loathe it. Didn't agree with Blair, did agree with Thatcher, one or two things I didn't. Trump the same. This is what I stood on. This is what you elected me on. I'm not interested in the people that say, oh, I don't like, I'm doing it. And you can stick it where the sun don't shine. We don't have that. We have politicians who are so easily able and willing to, I've got to upset this person, I've got to please. It doesn't make any sense.
But look at what he said after the inauguration, the speech he made there. There are two genders in America, male and female. And a whole great big cheer went up all over the world. Yeah, because he actually said something that was right and real and true. And most politicians in this country won't even do that.
Because they haven't got courage. 0344 499 1000. Mike is with me. After this break, I want you to think about this during the break. Are you going to get a heat pump and an electric car? I'm going to a break, coming back before you shout to me. Bye.
anybody who refused to take a job, not instantly sanctioned, full stop, you're done.
Well, Liz Kendall has said that she believes a lot of people are taking the mickey, her phrase, and that the department is going to start cracking down on this, because I think that's absolutely right. Nobody should be not working if they can, and nobody should be taking the mickey by taking benefits to which they are not entitled.
Well, then why are more people not being sanctioned?
And if people need help to get into jobs, then I think the state has a duty to actually help people as well. It's not just sanctions, but it's also a bit of support, because there are people who could work that don't.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
10 to 5, we're live across the UK. The host, the main man of this radio station, Mike Graham, is here with me. Back tomorrow morning at 6. Going home to cook tonight, or just going to collapse?
Actually, no. I made something last night, which I can eat tonight.
What?
Meatloaf. Did I not tell you?
No.
I made a meatloaf.
Like a bat out of hell, baby.
Yeah. It's a very American thing. But meatloaf, mashed potatoes, gravy, peas, very good.
Very good. Andy in Manchester says, please, Jez, Mikey, you and colleagues don't retire soon without talk. Where else would we hear what's really happening in the UK? Too many points to mention, but respect biological females, simple, not some weirdo in a dress and a wig. Yeah. Christine, a biological female, says 2 weeks ago I was using a supermarket ladies' toilet and 2 men walked in and went straight into a couple of cubicles, and one said to the other, if anyone asks why we're in here, just say you identify as a woman. These men weren't even dressed as women, they both just wanted to use the toilets for a poo. And there you are.
Horrible.
I mean, there you go.
That's horrible.
Caroline, BP going back to fossil fuels, hurrah! Let the madness of net zero and all that stupid deadlines and penalties start your road. Fingers crossed, but somehow I won't hold my breath. Mix in Wellington. Swinney has just handed the next election to reform in Scotland. That's an interesting thing. Graham packs a punch. He's in Bushy. That's where I got conceived. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
There's a thought. The only way to get the Gaza film debacle out into the open is for the commissioner of this programme at the BBC, the owner of Hoyo Films, who made the programme, and also Tim Davie, to appear at a common select committee to answer questions. Yeah, it's interesting, actually. Common select committees tend to go for people when they think they've got a point. Maybe that's a good idea. Will Lineker get a visit from the lefty police for supporting a prescribed Hamas terrorist organisation?
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? I mean, but the trouble is, Tim Davie's been before many various different select committees in Parliament, and he's so wet, and they're so sort of wet at asking him questions. What you need is set Lee Anderson on him and get him into one of these committees and get him to actually ask the questions, because the proper questions for Tim Davie is, you know, how is it possible that you, as the head of an organisation, have got so many problems, you know, worse than the government? You know, you've got, you know, miscreant members of the talent pool, whether they're on radio or TV doing things they shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
You've got massive questions about financing of documentaries, which are basically propaganda for terrorists. You've got incredible problems with, you know, working out the wokeists in the business. You've got anti-Semitism complaints all the time. The BBC is just not fit
Should we
for
just
purpose.
Start with Savile and crack on? Hugh Edwards, the paedophile, Rolf Harris,
Tim Westwood. I mean, the list goes on. Russell Brand. I mean,
you're going to love this, by the way. Donald Trump is at this moment holding his first cabinet meeting, and guess who's standing up and speaking? Let's cut to it quickly. Elon Musk's having a chat to everybody. Can we hear anything?
Taking a lot of flack and getting a lot of death threats, by the way. I mean, I'd like to stack them up, you know. But if we don't do this, America will go bankrupt. That's why it has to be done. And I'm confident at this point, knock on wood, you know, knock on my wooden head, there's got a lot of wood up there, that we can actually find $1 trillion in savings. That would be roughly 15% of the $7 trillion budget. And obviously that can only be done with the support of everyone in this room. And I'd like to thank everyone for your support. Thank you very much. This can only be done with your support. So it's really, DOGE is a support function for the president and for the agencies and departments to help achieve those savings and to effectively find 15% in reduction in fraud and waste.
It is extraordinary, isn't it? Can you imagine in number 10 Downing Street, some bloke, and he is the richest man in the world with the worst dress sense. He's already knocked his head twice and gone, I've got wood up there. Well, you're worth 480 billion. I'd bow down to your brilliance.
Exactly right.
He doesn't give a toss, Trump.
No, he doesn't.
He's going to do it his way or the highway.
And he's doing it really, really well. I mean, I said this morning, you know, last week all of the lefties were whining and groaning and moaning that, you know, how dare Donald Trump do this peace deal with Vladimir Putin? He's doing it all for himself. It's all about him.
Signed a Minister
narcissist.
yesterday.
Yeah. I mean, you know, he's rowing Vladimir Zelensky out of the deal. Really? He's going to Washington on Friday to sign the minerals deal.
Yeah.
You know, he's having a meeting with the Russian Sergei Lavrov in Saudi Arabia, along with Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State. I said at the time, why don't you wait and see what he's doing before you start criticising him for rowing everybody else out? He's told Europe to get its act together. Europe's now trying to get its act together. He's told Zelensky that you're not going to be able to carry on the way you were. He's not carrying on the way he was. I mean, the guy's just doing everything and fixing the world. It's quite extraordinary.
It says here, Ukrainian Vladimir Zelensky, this is breaking news, he's going to come to the UK as part of a gathering of European leaders to discuss defence and security when he's been to Washington, D.C.
Yes.
I know you've got to get home to your meatloaf. I'm going to be starving there. Let's go to London first. Sue, you're on Talk Drive. MG's with me. What you got?
Hiya. I was one of the few thousand that were outside the BBC last night protesting at their, about what they've done. And my question is, £400,000 to make this documentary, how much went to Hamas? Because I tell you what, I'm not going to pay my licence fee to somebody who supports Hamas.
Well, it is a really interesting point, and Mike made it earlier. We obviously, as a broadcaster, have to be careful. I'm not condoning anything, but you are going to get people in this country who are going to say, hold on a minute, so prescribing and supporting a prescribed terrorist organisation is a criminal offence, Mikey.
Yeah.
Is this why the BBC won't call Hamas a terrorist organisation? Because they are giving them money?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's that. I just think that they are so trapped in this anti-Semitic sort of circle of hell that they can't get out of it. There are people genuinely, and your caller there, I didn't catch your name, sorry.
Sue.
Sue, sorry. You know, you're absolutely right to demonstrate outside the BBC. It's an anti-Semitic organisation. We know it is. There is simply no other explanation. There are people in there, for good or ill, for one reason or another, who don't think Israel has a right to exist. And they shouldn't be working for the BBC.
Completely agree. Sue, thank you. Let's go to Bolton. Mark, you're on Talk Drive. Mike Graham's with me. What you got?
How you doing, Jez?
I'm all right, mate. Not bad for a balding 59-year-old has-been. What's happening?
I just wanted to speak about Mad Ed Miliband and this EV net zero craziness that's driving me insane. I was just ringing to let you know that these EVs, how much people don't want them. I know where there's a compound where there's about 300 to 500 vehicles that are pre-registered to try to meet the government target. Now, it's going to show that these vehicles are sold, and they're not.
The truth of the matter is, and I'll tell you something, we haven't got much time, but I don't believe the British people want them.
No.
I think they're really hard to insure, as Russell Crowe said earlier. I think they depreciate in value enormously quickly. I don't think they're as healthy or as reliable. And when you've only got 1% of the United Kingdom buying them, and they want that figure to be, 80% by 2035, what are you going to do? You're going to make a law. You've got to buy an EV. They were saying this about diesel cars. It just switches me and actually millions of people off my big time.
It does, totally. And also, people know that the problem with having an EV right now is that when you have a bump with it, if you even just have a little fender bender, as you used to call them in America, you can say a fender bender.
I bet you can't in Scotland.
Yeah, maybe not.
No.
But the thing is, the insurance company will say, we don't know what that does to the battery, we don't know what it does to the car, so we will now write that car off. So even if you just have a tiny little bump, the car's basically unsellable. You can't resell it on a second-hand market. So you've also got not enough charges around the country. People tell me, oh, it's great if you're driving around as long as you... No, it's not.
You can go 40 miles, you have to do it again.
Yeah, and if you put the air conditioning on, you can only do 20. That's every time you put something on in the car, the charge goes down. If you listen to talk in the car, you're running out of road within about sort of half the time you're supposed to.
Talking of which, and I have to do this, you've got a minute and a half because this man has to go home, eat meatloaf and get up again. You've got an amazing thing happening on breakfast. Tell us about the bumper stickers. This is extraordinary.
The bumper stickers are extraordinary. We've also now we've got thousands of people want bumper stickers. We're ordering more for them. We've just sent out a load of bumper stickers.
5,000.
I can reveal to you something which nobody knows right now, right?
Go.
There is a golden ticket, right? I've been sending out mailings today to the thousands of people that have asked for bumper stickers. Somewhere in all of those bumper stickers is a piece of paper which I've signed which says, congratulations, you have won the golden ticket.
What is it? What do they win?
I can't explain what they win because that's
do they
for
win
another
a new
time.
Bumper?
Well, I can't say, but what I'm saying is that if you are in receipt of that magic bumper sticker, a golden ticket, you get in touch with us and we tell you what we're going to do next.
It's going to be amazing. Listen to Mike in the morning. You can get your bumper sticky and send a photo of wherever you are in the UK. You are part of Morning Glory of the home of common sense. He is an amazing man. We've been working all day. You're back tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock.
I'm back tomorrow morning at 6, yeah, absolutely. More bumper stickers. We're going to do more of the Trump press conference, which is still going on, which is going to be absolutely incredible. Also, you know, Mr. Starmer goes to Washington. You know, it sounds like the name of a film.
It does.
A very long time ago.
Starmer drama in Washington.
Starmer's going to get his bottom spanked by the president.
I'll be watching and listening. MG, back tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock. It's almost 5. We're live across the UK. 0344 499 1000. News at 5 is next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just gone 5 o'clock. We're live across the UK. If you're a cricket fan, England are attempting to beat Afghanistan. Yes, home of the Taliban in cricket. You'd think it wouldn't be that bad. It's coming down to the wire. If we lose to the Taliban, we're out of the Champions Trophy. That'll be embarrassing. Drive time's on till 7 o'clock. The amazing Tim Montgomery, former number 10 advisor in Just a Tick, though. Straight to the phone lines. We'll go north to Aberdeen. And Tracy, a very good afternoon to you on the day that the Scotland First Minister has backed the right of trans people who just self-identify and might still have a penis that they can go into a female toilet and get changed. Thoughts?
Yeah, good afternoon, Jeremy. I just wanted to say I was driving home from work this afternoon and I put on the radio and I was listening to the local radio, and John Swinney came on and said that he was going to be having talks with certain leaders because he's concerned about the high rise in extreme views and people going further to the right, chasing reform. And that was before I found out about what he was saying about trans. And I'm so glad that he said that about the trans people, because now I think most of Scotland will be voting for reform, because it's absolutely disgusting.
The problem is, and I genuinely said this with Russell Quirk earlier, I don't want to get involved in the trans debate. I just think it is an absolutely ludicrous scenario. And we go back to Isla Bryson a year ago, for a man who has raped, and I will keep saying this till they drag me out of the studio, raped 2 women, to halfway through a trial that he's going to be found guilty of and go to jail, to don a wig and put a pair of tight trousers on and then parade around where you can absolutely see he's got a penis. And any single person who goes on and on about women's rights, which I actually support, that goes out the bleeding window, because they go, oh, what about trans rights? No, what about teenage girls' rights in public toilets? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, but I mean, he's got the cheek to say that we're all having extreme views. To me, that is extreme.
I agree. Really interesting.
Not to be able to go into a female space in private, knowing where you're safe, and a man might walk through the door.
I completely agree with you, Tracy. You'll be reform voting in Aberdeen. Let's go to Gloucester, actually, very quickly before Tim. David, you're on Talk Drive. A very good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Good afternoon, Jeremy. How are things? Yeah, we're all good.
What do you want to talk about?
Well, very quickly about this whole trans thing, and you know, I've always thought for a very long time that it's actually a pervert's charter. You know, because, I mean, let's be honest, real men will respect women and give them their space and let them do what they've got to do. I mean, I've got a daughter that's nearly a teenager, not quite, you know, and my wife and my mother and my sister and my friends, you know, you've got to respect their rights. But, oh, no, let's have a law that just says, right, I'm a perv, I'm a wrong un, I can just walk into a women's changing room and have a good old stare.
Listen, one thing that people will know is I do try and see both sides. I probably don't agree with your language. I understand your frustration. For me, it's a little bit more... I would describe it like this, David. If you are going to say to a group of people, we identify and wrong word, we acknowledge your rights and all that sort of thing, that's fine. But if you are then in your quest to box tick, taking away the safety in some instances, the personal choice of other people, I think that is wrong. Thank you to David. We're giving him a big build-up because he is the main man, former number 10 advisor, now with Reform, Tim Montgomery, good afternoon, who said to me, whilst I've been in the building during your show and I was having a little nap. What's the matter with you, TM?
I don't know why I deserve that build-up after being rude to you, but...
I'm all right.
By the way, what's happened to Scotland? I always sort of had this idea of Scotland as being the sort of the sturdy, grown-up part of the nation, and the Scottish people were sort of... And maybe the Scottish people do still...
Well,
I've
had 3 calls from Scotland. They're all appalled by Swinny, because this is the...
It's the government that's letting them down.
This is, Scotland. With respect, this is the hill on which Nicola Sturgeon died, isn't it?
Yeah, and she did die on it, yeah.
And that opened up a whole can of whoop-ass, and then we found out she'd bought and done allegedly all sorts of things, or her husband had anyway.
Yeah, that investigation's still going on as well. Talk about that's another story.
Explain to me from a political point of view, what does Swinny, is it literally to box tick such a very small number of people to the detriment, it would seem, of a majority of people?
Well, you know, he's done quite well. You know, if you look at the opinion polls now in Scotland, he's restored the SNP.
Has he?
It's largely because the Scottish Labour Party's, you know, suffering from the unpopularity of Keir Starmer. But what he's been successful at, it's a bit like Wyatt Davey sort of rescued the Lib Dems, is he hasn't really
does he dress up and throw himself off sort of abseiling fronts as well, does he?
But you know, they haven't sort of taken up the sort of controversial positions that Nicola Sturgeon did. So John Swinny, I think, is making a big mistake if he thinks it's now safe for him to start adopting these positions which the majority of Scottish people do not support.
And I think the minute you get into that debate about trans, it becomes so emotional and so emotive, and people jump up and down and point the finger.
Well, like your callers, people are genuinely upset
but
about it.
But I think people have every right to say, my daughter, my wife, my aunt, my niece, whatever, they don't want that.
No.
What is wrong with saying that?
Well, there's nothing wrong with it at all. And the problem is, I think, why is John Swinny doing this, is a lot of the political parties have been hijacked by activists.
Yeah.
They go in, they pay the money, you know, political parties are short of money, they pay their subs, and then they take over these political parties. And so the political parties aren't representing the people at large, they're representing the activists that they depend upon for cash, and who will, will shout at them and
I think it's
them
the
on
beginning.
Twitter.
I think it's the the beginning of the end of the slippery slope for him as well. Talking about political parties, you defected some months ago to Reform. You were very outspoken. You were here with Kev talking about that.
And here with you as well.
Yes. Today we've decided, or rather heard, that Dominic Cummings has sensationally come out to back Reform in the latest boost for Nigel Farage's insurgent party. Asked by one ex-user this morning who's backing at the next election, Dominic Cummings bluntly replied, "Don't know yet, but obviously everyone should vote Reform this spring." He added, "No downsides, just upsides. It's the latest defection to Reform following a number of former MPs, people like yourself." What's your response to Cummings? Are you welcoming that, or are you slightly wary because he is a very divisive figure?
More the latter, I think, actually.
Yeah.
But look, I worked with Dominic Cummings when I was at Tory HQ. He's a brilliant man, but like a lot of brilliant people, he has downsides and
doesn't suffer fools gladly.
He thinks everyone's more stupid than he is.
Is it true?
More stupid than
is
he
it true?
Well, largely, probably is. But most people are also a lot nicer than him.
Yeah.
So he will back Reform this local elections, but Reform shouldn't count on his support beyond then. He's actually trying to set up his own political party. I don't know whether you noticed that.
No, what is he?
Yeah, Startup Party, I think it's called.
It's really interesting. Actually, Nigel copped a lot of flack over the Tommy Robinson. He came out and he said, "That's not what I want in my party." It'll be interesting if Dominic Cummings starts to sidle up, because he's a very divisive figure, and it'll be interesting to see how Nigel responds to that. When people were criticising him over Tommy Robinson, I actually thought to myself, well, that actually shows leadership, because I crave in this country leaders who actually do not get deflected simply because somebody criticises them or accuses them of something, or says, "Oh, you've upset this group of wannabe whatevers, activists," and those sort of conviction politicians that we don't seem to have anymore.
Well, I've been in Reform now for nearly 3 months. My overall impression is Reform as an organisation is less impressive than I thought it would be.
Right.
I think there's it's not quite professional yet. But Nigel Farage is more impressive than I ever realised. Just spending more time with him, listening to him, his judgment is impeccable. He really and his work rate is extraordinary.
Think he can be the next Prime Minister of this country?
I think it's going to be hard, because if it was a presidential or mayoral system when it was only him on the ballot paper, I think he'd win it. But the trouble is, he has to find 350 or so candidates who, and to be an MP, I'd never do it, Jeremy. I don't know whether you'd be interested.
Oh, I'd love to one day.
Would you be?
Everybody knows that.
Seriously? Oh, I didn't know that. No.
£1 million straight away.
Yeah, but because you have to be of ministerial quality, which you would.
Well, I'd want that straight away. I'm not even going to lie.
You have to, but also you have to be lobby fodder for 90% of the time. So even you have to agree with the party line, even if when you don't. So those two things are always in contradiction.
I always thought that Nigel might go for London Mayor before he went back to Reform.
I think he's got more ambitions now.
Absolutely, and why not?
Than that, and the way this government's imploding, the way that Kemi Badenoch is making no impression. Certainly there's room for a new...
Well, that's a really interesting segue, and this is why you are the broadcaster and the man that we love. Let's do that. See what we did? It's seamless. Absolutely.
It's almost as if it was planned.
It was almost as if we hadn't thrown this together. Yesterday, Slimy Starmer stood up and made a big thing about, listen, I've changed. I mean, times are dreary, and I need to take some money from the international aid budget. I know I tweeted in 2021 the Tories were awful to do this, as did Angela. But today I'm going to announce that is going to come from that, and I'm going to spend it on defence, and it's going to be £13.4 billion. Do you feel like you've been strong-armed by Mr Trump? No, I'm not getting involved with that. OK, so today we wake up and Kemi Badenoch at Prime Minister's Question Time uses up her 6 questions to basically try and get to where that money is going to go. Is it going to go on tanks or logistical equipment? Is it go on fatigues? Veterans! It'd be good, wouldn't it, to look after the homeless veterans? Because, you see, that's the thing that gets me. There are veterans on the streets, and yet the illegal immigrants are in hotels. Just going to put it out there.
Far too many veterans.
But in the Commons, she demanded also clarity and transparency over whether any of that savings is going to go towards this ridiculous... There you are. Have the Chagos Islands and £9 million, Mauritius. I know you didn't ask for them.
9 billion?
9 billion, 9 billion.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't bloody answer him 3 times.
And when a politician doesn't answer a direct question like that, we know what it means, don't we? It means that it is their intention to do that. So you're completely right. This money that's supposedly going to the defence of Britain isn't actually going to the defence of Britain, it's going to the surrender of Britain to these international lawyers.
But then Peter Cardwell was very right when he said, that's all well and good that Slimy Starmer again thinks he can get away with it. But if you look at the impact that Donald Trump's had, like him or loathe him, he's not going to swallow that tomorrow in Washington, D.C. from Starmer. He's going to say, if you're going to do what I say you should do and increase your defence spending, you are not spending that money on giving away the Chagos Island, which I don't want you to do anyway.
Well, he hasn't ruled on that still yet, has he, Trump? So
do you think that Starmer, by this announcement yesterday, has put himself out there as a poodle straight away? Because I do. I think Donald Trump has called the shots straight away.
Well, look, Barack Obama, George W. Bush before him, Joe Biden, they all asked Britain and other European countries to spend more on defence. Did any of them? No. But then suddenly Trump plays really hardball, and we've had this talk in the last 2 weeks about America essentially withdrawing its support for Europe, and suddenly they find the money. So Donald Trump is playing the whole of Europe. He's basically running the whole of Europe at the moment.
I understand. I don't know. I'd love to know what you people think at home, by the way. 0344 499 1000. I absolutely understand America's president saying, I'm really sorry. I've got issues with China.
Yeah.
I got elected by saying I would make my country safer, more prosperous, better off, lower taxation, and so on, immigration problem.
Yeah.
Why should I police Europe?
Completely.
You can take NATO and if you are him and go, I'm paying far more than any of you.
Yeah.
There was this great thing the other day, and I'm going to get it wrong, but it said, let's see if I can find it to you, because you were the absolute right person to read this to very, very quickly. This is the moment where you talk amongst yourselves and you hope you can find it. Blah, 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 0344 499 1000 if you'd like to be on the show. Yes, here it is. You see, I'm actually quicker than you would imagine. The leaders of 500 million Europeans are waiting for 340 million Americans, Tim, to protect them from 140 million Russians who haven't been able to win against 30 million Ukrainians in 3 years.
Who said that?
It's just something that was sent to me.
That was a brilliant quote.
But it's true, isn't it?
Absolutely on the money, completely on the money. And imagine a sort of like a 50-year-old adult still expecting his parents to pay for his meals. Why is Europe still expecting America to pay for its defence?
And I actually said yesterday, and I'm going to aim this at the Tories across 14 years, and I know you were part of that, but it became
Thank you for reminding
but it became the easy cut, didn't it? It started with Cameron. Let's just cut defence.
Yeah.
Was it because they believed everything was fine, or was it because actually they realised that a good old Uncle Sam would look after them? And I'm sort of with Donald Trump on that, and he's affected change straight away.
Me too. I think it was both. I think there's always more money. There's more political value in spending money on nurses than soldiers.
Yes.
Because you only appreciate soldiers when you're at war, whereas you appreciate nurses and police officers and teachers all of the time. So there's a bias for politicians to spend it on those things. But then I think you're right. In the back of their mind, they knew, well, we can get away with it anyway, because if we're in trouble, America will defend us.
Are you a cricket fan?
I am a cricket fan, yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's 5:15 on Wednesday the 26th of February, and Great Britain has yet again proven itself to be crap. We have just been beaten by Afghanistan in the Champions Trophy at cricket, and we are out of the tournament, beaten by a country that's run by the Taliban. We've just lost at cricket to Afghanistan.
Do you know what? I'm kind of pleased in a way we have, because I don't think we should have played Afghanistan. We should have boycotted them. I don't know if you saw the campaign that was run.
Yeah.
The fact is that the women of Afghanistan are being treated like second-class citizens, just like they were by the Taliban. And yet, we should not have gone there to play there. And now we've been humiliated.
Completely humiliated.
So, and we've been humiliated. We didn't stand by our principles, and now we've been humiliated in the cricket. So in a way, the cricketers deserve it, as far
Is
as
there
I'm
anything
concerned.
about this country that isn't humiliating or annoying right now? While we're at it, let's do the other big story of the day before we let you go. Net zero madness. I found out more about this today. There's a climate change committee based inside Ed Miliband's department, headed by a woman who's got real qualifications. Do you know what she's got?
No.
An honours degree in classics.
It sounds like Boris Johnson.
Yes, well, she's in charge of net zero. They've decided that everybody, well, at the moment, heat pumps, that by 2035, they want 1.5 million a year for the next... They want about 20 million homes to have heat pumps, which cost £20,000. They also want a population that right now, 1.4% of us have EV cars. 80% have to. Now, obviously, nobody wants to buy them because they depreciate in value, you can't insure them, and they're not very worthwhile. This madness continues. Our energy bills continue to go up. Bit of a bright light for us today. BP's turned around and gone, I know we said we were green, but it's a load of old BS, so now we're going back to oil and gas.
Yeah.
What is wrong? Why do these people, again, we're back to ideology, think that the British public can suck this up? They're not.
Well, just the BP story particularly interests me, actually, because all these companies that we thought have been woke for a long time, and a lot of them are, You know what mainly are? They're just weak, not woke. The fact is that now there's a new president, so Trump is running, not just Europe, he's running the world. He's come in and he says, actually, I don't like a lot of this nonsense. And all the companies are capitulating again because they want US contracts. They want to be on the side of the new powerful US president. They're pathetic, these companies.
It's really interesting. In terms of net zero, it becomes this sort of fad. I mean, obviously we're on this station, but I don't know anybody in my life who thinks it's worthwhile. And my kids get really angry with me because I say, that's your generation. I'm sure there are things that can be done.
Yeah.
But would I be wrong to say, Tim, that there are priorities in this country and, in fact, in this world right now which demand greater attention rather soon?
100%. And also, I think it's wise to not rush into these situations because if you look at the history of Britain's sort of energy policy since the post-war period, we've always invested in immature technologies. So we're saddled like with nuclear power stations that cost far too much money, like Hinkley Point that we're building at the moment. And Bill Gates, someone who does know a little bit about this, he says the technology that will be available in 10 or 15 years will be able to deliver green energy at a fraction of the price of now. So what we're going to have all these immature early technologies costing us a fortune and not making much of a difference to the environment. So absolutely, let's tackle the priorities we really have now, and we know the technologies that are coming down the line, they'll save the planet.
It's so good to have you here. I'm sorry that you slept during the introduction, but I mean, very, very kind.
I don't know why you've been nice to me at all.
Because you're a very nice man, and we love having you on. Tim Montgomery, former number 10 advisor who defected to Reform 3 months ago now, being very honest, and says Nigel Farage is impeccable, his work rate, he's a job to do with the party, but very interesting times. Thank you very much indeed, Tim. If you want to be on, my friends, we're here until 7 o'clock on Talk Drive. Talk, of course, the home of free speech and common sense and breaking news. Are you embarrassed by being British? I am. England have just been beaten by Afghanistan in the cricket. We're out the Champions Trophy. This is Afghanistan that's run by the Taliban. Extraordinary. 5:20.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
We're back, 5:23. We're live across the United Kingdom. Can I just take a moment here, please? OK, forget all that's going on in the world, and we're rubbish at cricket. My two beautiful children, Oliver William Robin Kyle, who's now grinning at the radio, and Iris Rose Victoria, who's cutting her teeth and is up all night, have just been swimming and they're in the car. Hello, gang. I hope you behave. Oliver, are you being good? I'm sure he is. His mum's away for a night at the weekend. He said to me, I'm going to have a sleepover and have McDonald's. You can have whatever you want, mate. I hope you're all right. See you very soon. If you want to be on, by the way, 0344 499 1000. Text to 87222. Start your message with the word talk. So much going on. A very good afternoon to Mark in Beccles in Suffolk. I know Eccles, that's where they make cakes, which make you... They give you wind. But Beccles, I don't know. We're being told by the government that we will all need to be flying less. Then why do they need to build a new runway at Heathrow if air travel is reduced? Also, if I volunteer to pay more tax, will it stop raining? No, it won't stop raining. And yes, you're absolutely right. Net zero means we shouldn't be able to go on flights. But we're also going to build a new runway. That's because they're all completely mad. Graham Pack. Where's Cardi P? I think Cardi P's... Is he gone for a lie-down after his earlier rant? I think he's having oxygen. I have to say I agree with everything he said. He was very, very angry, Cardi P. Very angry. Warren, Gary Lineker, what a joke. He has been for a long time. Why should he just not... What? We shouldn't give him airtime. The man's a disgrace. I'm from Leicester, and I feel disgraceful that he came from this city. This is on the back of Gary Lineker today, along with 500 TV industry figures, signing a letter calling the BBC... Well, you've bowed to censorship and racism by getting rid of that sort of Hamas propaganda programme you were talking about. Hello to Lynn from Staines. I'm not a Jew, and possibly I'm an atheist. As I see it, the Jewish people deserve all our heartfelt respect and support. Bernie's in Hartlepool. I can't wait for Friday when two-tier Kia announces the Chagos deal is cancelled. I have to say, I do utterly agree with you, Bernie. The minute he gets to Washington and the Orange Man baby goes, you know, that money you promised for defence, you ain't spending that on the Chagos Islands because I don't want you to do that. And if you do, I'm going to do something that you won't like. All right, OK, we're not doing the Chagos Islands deal anymore. Hello to Paula. We shouldn't be paying cricket against Afghanistan. Women cannot speak, have education and are owned by men. Serve the ECB and its payers right for agreeing to this tour. It disgusts me. I love cricket, but I will no longer support the team or pay money for an international. Well said to you, Paula. Tim Montgomery made the point. England are that crap at cricket. They just lost to Afghanistan. Of course, Afghanistan is ruled by the Taliban, who are anti-women. Right? We shouldn't have played the game. Completely agree with you. Hello to, Tony Parker. English cricket is being ruined by the woke rubbish at the 100. Everyone is being conditioned to treat it like baseball. Don't know what you're doing with that. Also, Chris, watch England. Only a couple of batsmen worth anything. And why is Afghanistan... Yeah, all right. Basically, the cricket thing's got you. Most people are saying you deserve it for going there in the first place. 5:26. Next guest up, Director of Public Affairs for the Jewish Leadership Council. Delighted. Russell Langer, a very good afternoon. Welcome to Talk Drive. How are you?
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Always. I've been very outspoken and very vocal in my support for the Jewish community in the last 3 years, and I will continue to do that. I just want to talk about this BBC documentary. I was away last week, so let's give a bit of clarity. This programme was called, and I quote, well, you'll help me out, Gaza, a view of the war zone, OK? We heard it was going to be on the BBC. Transpires that this programme was made by an independent production company. I know enough about television to tell you that big conglomerates will commission production companies, give them money, they make it. Now, this programme caused outrage because it turned out that it was voiced by a 13-year-old and through whose eyes we were apparently understanding what life is like in Gaza. Turns out that he's the son of a Hamas official. Now, Hamas is a terrorist organisation. On this station, and anybody with a brain cell in the world knows that that's the case, because they murder and kill people. They're a terrorist organisation. Only thing is the BBC won't admit to that, Russell, as you know. And so many people have, rightly, I think, jumped up and down and said, this is pure anti-Israeli and anti-Jewish propaganda and pro-Hamas. We saw pictures yesterday of a cameraman on the programme celebrating the October the 7th massacre. Today, the BBC has been accused of whitewashing the views of participants, right? After repeatedly mistranslating references to the Jews and omitting the phrase of jihad, it's been revealed that on at least 5 occasions, the words Yahud or Yehudi, Arabic for Jew or Jews, were changed to Israel or Israeli forces and removed from subtitles altogether. This is an appalling demonstration, is it not, of how our public service broadcaster has lost I would believe that the confidence of a massive majority in this country. I myself, I don't want to pay a licence fee to an organisation that is so biased in its approach.
Where do you start with this documentary? There's just so many things that have gone wrong with it. The BBC been forced to admit that this production, the producers didn't tell them the whole truth about the story of those.
Don't commission it then. I've no sympathy for that argument. Don't commission it.
No, it's basic due diligence, which they've obviously clearly failed to do. They've failed the Jewish community in many aspects of this documentary, but I'd go further and say they've failed the British public with this documentary. People should be able to trust our national broadcasters that they would do this due diligence, will look into these basic questions of competence, but more than just the links to Hamas by those featured in it, going further and mistranslating and misleading the audience by translating the word Yahud, which clearly should translate to Jew, into jihad. They've done that at least 5 times, including the phrase jihad against the Jews. They translated into fighting against Israeli forces, which is just a mistranslation. It doesn't serve anybody.
It's really, this has been further accentuated today, and I'll try not to appear too angry. Gary Lineker, him again, has criticised this afternoon the BBC for pulling its controversial Gaza documentary, because on the back of this criticism, the BBC pulled it off iPlayer and went, oh, due diligence, should have done it before, you idiots. The departing Match of the Day presenter, amongst 500 TV industry figures, Miriam Margolis, Anita Rani, the Countryfile presenter, other BBC staff as well, to sign a letter accusing the corporation of bowing to censorship and racism by removing this from the iPlayer. Please respond to that, Russell Langer.
It's obviously a ridiculous take and completely ignores the real issues that have been raised about this documentary, and you just hope that those people who signed it did so ignorantly without even looking into it, because if they'd done the most basic research, they'll see that there are serious issues here. And I'd commend Lisa Nandy, the Culture Secretary, who's seen the issues of this documentary, raised those questions. So I think that's the next bit. We need to go further than just this one programme. This is systemic of the issues that we've seen in the BBC. You raised, not calling Hamas terrorists, which is just outrageous. And I think it's important when we're talking about these issues, such as hiding the anti-Semitism on display by referring to the Yahuds and fighting the Jews, and then mistranslating that into Israelis.
Do you believe that the BBC is anti-Semitic?
I think it's too large of a corporation to brand everybody within it anti-Semitic. I know there's certainly lots of good journalists there doing hard work, but there is systemic issues that have been on display with how they have been covering this Israeli-Palestinian conflict, not just in the last 16 months, but certainly in the last 16 months.
And it's really interesting. I've had arguments,
and root and branch reform. If they just cover this up, and they've taken this documentary off air, I welcome that. But if that's the end of it and they don't take this opportunity to do a proper period of reflection and investigate how these mistakes went wrong on a systemic level, then they're still continuing to let us all down.
Well, I'll put it far more directly, and I think, I've fallen out with friends over this whole Israeli-Hamas thing, because there's this sort of inherent leftist view that Palestine has come out of this wrongly, and the Jews are this. Let's just talk about the democratically elected organisation of Israeli government. I'm not a massive Netanyahu fan. There are things he's done that I don't agree with. And let's talk about what Hamas is. And I would simply say this to Tim Davie. I saw some ridiculous interview in front of a select committee talking about getting Hugh Edwards' £200,000 pension back, when he said, well, we've asked, right? Well, if you don't pay your licence fee, they take you to court. I don't know what Tim Davie needs to get his head out of his backside for, but let's start with Savile. Let's go to Hugh Edwards, £200,000 pension, 400 grand in wages, whilst they knew he was being accused of paedophilia. He's walking the streets of Great Britain. We can talk about Harris, we can talk about Stuart Hall, we can talk about all number of situations. The Tim Westwood thing, we can talk about this documentary. The fact is the BBC, in my mind, is so set in its belief, like many other organisations in this country, that, you know, they are the BBC. What they say is right. We need to countenance all these different arguments for all sorts of people. Your existence, BBC, is paid for by us. And I can tell you there are millions of people who are now saying, why the hell would we be forced to pay money for something we don't watch, we don't think is state broadcast, unbiased, worthy stuff? We choose what we watch. So for the people who argue and say, well, you're a little bit to the right. Yeah, you can choose to listen to talk or you can choose not. I've been very pro the Jewish... I've got friends whose kids can't wear their blazers in the high streets in London, in North London, for fear of being abused. And I will fight against that till every last breath is taken from me. But that doesn't mean I don't listen to the other side. But you don't get that. And on this, you know, on this point, you know, the BBC... as so many other people are not listening to the British people, Starmer is it, and in the end, the British people, I don't believe the BBC will be here in 3 years. There, I've said it. I don't think it's sustainable at all in a million years. I don't.
Well, as more and more people move away from traditional media sources, I think the BBC is up with a massive challenge there. But if we look at this, the way that they've tried, I think there's a culture within the BBC which tries to look at it as we get criticised by both sides and therefore we're getting it right. But there isn't a both sides to this. We're in the week that Hamas paraded the coffins of a baby and his infant brother, along with a body that they claimed was their mother's and wasn't even their mother's. You know, that happened.
And said to the bloke they relieved who looked like he, and said to that man who'd been released in some of the most horrific footage I think I've ever seen, who looked like he'd been in a concentration camp, said to him, say on camera, I'm looking forward to seeing my wife and kids knowing that they were dead. So you know what? All those people who jump up and down and spout about Gaza, I don't know what's happening in Gaza. I don't happen to like war, but I certainly know what a terrorist organisation is. And you know, I've had text messages today, Russell, this is really interesting, from people who are saying, so if Hamas, in a way, did they get any of that 400 grand for that programme? We have no idea. But in fact, if somebody's spouting, if somebody's presenting a programme, maybe they were paid. If they're tied to Hamas, there are people saying, am I paying my licence fee to in part fund a terrorist organisation because that's against the law?
It's an excellent question, and I know that's been raised to the Home Office, and I don't think they've been able to. I think it's something they need to be looking at. They need to be questioning the BBC. At the end of the day, whether the BBC agrees with it, the terminology or not, they are a terrorist organisation under UK law and under the law of many of our Western allies, and therefore the idea that any public funded money that could be coming from your TV licence fee, my TV licence fee, could be going towards that is definitely something that needs to be urgently investigated.
Russell, we really appreciate you being on the Director of Public Affairs for the Jewish Leadership Council, and yet again on Talk Drive. I'm not going to say it's breaking news, but pin back your logos. I can tell you, what can I tell you? I can't give you too much detail, but I'll tell you this. Tim Davie, the boss of the BBC, will be under even more pressure tomorrow. Can't tell you how, but I can tell you he will be. Tim Davie tomorrow morning. It'll start with Mike Graham on Morning Glory. Tune in from 6, you'll find out more. Tim Davie, the boss of the BBC, tomorrow will be under even more pressure as it cranks up on an organisation that takes our money, is supposed to be a state broadcaster, and in anybody's mind is completely biased. And before people say to me, oh, Talk's quite biased, you pays your money, you takes your choice. With the BBC, they takes your money and they makes your bloody choice. Back in 3.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
22 minutes to 6 o'clock. We're live across the UK. Just announced it before the break. I'll repeat it. Can't get into too much detail. Tim Davie, the boss, the secretary, the boss, man, whatever he's called, I don't know what his name is. Anyway, he's in charge of the BBC. Will come under even greater pressure tomorrow. Trust me. 0344, about bloody time as well. 0344 499 1000. Now, let's take a moment, OK, as I watch Donald Trump, the Orange Man baby, addressing his cabinet. Let's take a moment, not because I want a biscuit, but because I want you, OK, to understand that I want to give you some money. £25,000 tax-free could be in your account. Mike Graham, who actually isn't eating meatloaf, he's still bloody working. Push the button now, Amy, because I think there's a delay. How can you win the money, Mike?
Time's running out to get involved in our 25 grand competition. Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to win this life-changing amount of money for 2025. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that, but time is running out. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Get off the telly, Mike, and get my meatloaf ready. It says, by the way, send the word prize, not pride. 0344 499 1000. Text to 87222 to the phone lines. We'll go to Surrey. It's posh there. Mike, you're on Talk Drive. Whereabouts in Surrey, my friend? Oh, he's dropped off. Well, that's great. People say that to me. Great. Let's go to Croydon. That's not Surrey. Peter, a very good evening. How are you, sir? Welcome to Talk Drive.
How are you, Jeremy? Yeah. A couple of months ago, there was the same issue about the BBC, something about Israel. Anyway, I said to you, I've had enough. My grandfather was Jewish, and I said, look, I've done with them. I'm going to cancel my licence, and I did. And I just sent them an email. And between you and me, I haven't heard anything. So, but yeah. That's what I've done. So
I cannot, obviously, condone not paying the BBC licence fee, because that would be breaking the law. However, I'm going to say something I said before the break. If the £400,000 that was used, which is from, licence fee payers, that was used to fund The View of a War Zone, that Gaza documentary that's been removed from the BBC iPlayer, because the bosses at BBC actually admit that there's issues with it in all sorts of ways. If that money has filtered through to Hamas, who's the 13-year-old son voiced it of a Hamas official, surely that can be viewed as our money funding a terrorist organisation. Of course, the BBC aren't going to respond, but I'll tell you something, if you don't pay your licence fee, you will be prosecuted. I think there will be a natural, I don't know the best way to put this, I think that interest in the BBC, trust in the BBC, desire for the BBC will slowly disappear. What we have in this country now, and I can say this, just one of the few things I can talk about that I know, right? The rest is opinion. Terrestrial television is dying on its backside, OK? And people's way that they watch news, entertainment, is so different, be it on a laptop, on a smartphone, on the train, bus, record it, watch it later. People don't... When I was on television, people would sit down and watch television. The world has changed. And with that comes changes to how organisations not only promote what they put out, but how they are successful. Now, anybody that's not the BBC only survives by selling adverts, and the advertisers buy adverts if you get good listeners. If you get good figures, you get more advertisers, you get more money, the programmes are better. The BBC has never had to justify itself. I think in the years to come, the BBC is going to have to increasingly justify itself, and I think if you look at what's going on, they are going to miss the point. Let's go to Cornwall. Been a while, I haven't spoken to you for ages, Jill. How are you?
Well, I'm just fine, Jeremy. I was deciding what I was going to complain to you about. There's so many things that upset me at the moment. it's difficult to sort of know where to start. I'm so angry with what they've said. I think the Scottish MP, is he?
The Scottish First Minister, John Sweeney, who has today, just if you're just tuning in or you're in your car and you haven't heard this news, brilliant. Scotland's First Minister has today backed the right of trans people who self-identify as a woman to use female toilets and changing rooms. You don't need to have gone through any medical procedure, so you can have a penis and you can walk into a female changing room and take your trousers off.
Well, for goodness sake, no, you can't. I tell you what, if he walked into a toilet that I was in, into a women's changing room that I was in, and dropped his trousers, well, he'd never lived to find out what I felt about the situation. Well, but what are people thinking?
I've no idea.
I'm sorry, but oh, gosh, there's no way of saying this without it sounding wrong. For him to be able to still... For him to have a penis and stand in a toilet next to women who do not have these things, then I'm sorry, but where does he have the right to be there?
It's really interesting though, Jill, isn't it? Because you know, there was, and I keep bringing back to this for a reason. There was this story which I'm sure you saw in Scotland a year or so ago. It was a male rapist. And this male rapist, halfway through its trial for raping, I say that, and I'm not trying to shock people, raping 2 women, decided to change sex by putting on a wig and a pair of tight trousers, despite the fact that he had a penis, call himself Isla Bryson. And Sturgeon's government went, oh, you've got to go to a female prison, that's your right. Despite the fact, can I just say this without shouting, he'd raped 2 women. It is madness. It is based entirely on trying to placate a really small minority, and he is Sweeney, whatever Swiney, is going down exactly the same road that cost Nicola Sturgeon rightly the leadership of Scotland. It's madness, Jill. And when people like you and I say it's madness, I have people who say to me, you're very outspoken. No. I just crave those old days, Jill. I heard Ricky Gervais say this the other day. Gosh. Can you imagine, you know those old-fashioned women, the ones that have a womb? Call me boring. Do you know what I mean? The world's mad, mate.
And the thing is, oh gosh, here we go. Very tactfully trying to say this. If he thinks of himself as being a female,
yes.
Why do they not cut off the bits that he doesn't need anymore?
Well, you don't need to cut your bits off now. Listen, if Ryan, who produces this show, decides to become Rihanna tomorrow, OK, he can go to Glasgow on a train, put a skirt on, have to be a big one, and he can go into a female toilet and have a wee. He doesn't have to, but he's not a woman. He's just a bloke with long legs who likes wearing skirts. I'm not saying that is the case, but that's how mad and weird it all is, Jill. And for many of us, I have to say, it's madness and it's frustrating. We really appreciate how's sunny Cornwall? Is it raining?
Absolutely piddling down. There you go.
Whereabouts in Cornwall?
Well, I'm sort of near the Tamar Valley.
Amazing place. And we love having you on. Thank you very much indeed. The amazing Jill in Cornwall. Hello to Phil in Portsmouth. If you don't pay your licence fee, they will put you in prison where you can watch the TV for free, says Phil in Portsmouth. I hadn't thought about that. That's clever. Jules is in Bristol. Jules, good afternoon. Perhaps the senior managers, Jez, of the Biased Broadcasting Corporation should pay back the money used for Hamas propaganda from their bonuses. Might make them think twice and carry out due diligence before they next commission a programme. Hi, Jeremy. Short point. Why don't we just give the Chagos Islands to America? Problem solved, and we save £9 billion. What a fantastic idea that is. 13 minutes to 6 o'clock. We're live across the UK. Ryan and Jodie and Amy and a man who I have no idea who it is are doing a fantastic job this afternoon. 0344 499 1000. Sport is next.
Yeah, we're not talking about defence and military expenditure, but I think his speech yesterday was weak, pathetic, certainly not enough, wrong timeline, and actually mendacious, because he was actually talking about figures that he was manipulating figures, massaging the figures. The actual sort of fiscal benefit to the defence budget isn't anything near what he's trying to make out.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, 10 to 6. We're live across the UK. You try eating a digestive, or it's a rich tea biscuit whilst doing the sport. Push the button, names.
Sport Summary on Talk.
We welcome to the studio my illegitimate son and a protege of mine, Sam Ellard. A very good afternoon.
Good afternoon. We have a lot to do here, Jeremy, don't we? Normally we have banter.
I'm going to rant.
I'm not going to rant.
I'm going to rant.
About what?
The cricket.
OK, you rant, then I'll do my thing.
Champions League, 50 over competition. Brendan McCullum did such a good job with the test team, has taken over the one, but we've lost like the last 13 games. We're playing Afghanistan, ladies and gentlemen, just to stay in the competition. Afghanistan managed to score 326. We're bowled out for 317. We lose to Afghanistan. I absolutely agree with the hundreds of people who have texted and say, shame on you, England. You shouldn't have been in the tournament in the first place. Afghanistan is run by the Taliban, who treat people, homosexuals and women, so appallingly. It's an absolute disgrace. You've got egg on your face, ECB, and you've got your just desserts.
OK, well,
completely agree.
Two things here. This obviously was a big thing before the competition. Should England and other countries boycott it? England decided not to. They wanted to play. They wanted...
and we're crap.
They wanted leadership from the top of the ICC, who did absolutely nothing. So England ended up playing. We discussed it, didn't we, at the time? I very much said that any decision like that should have come from the top, the ICC.
Yep.
There was nothing, so England went there and they played. Well, let's just say, Jeremy, it started on Saturday, it's ended today. A defeat to Australia, a defeat now today against Afghanistan. Afghanistan batting first, scoring 325. England falling just short, Joe Root scoring 100. The England white ball team from the period of 2016 to 2020 was the best team in the world, and there's no doubt about it. They were the double world champions in 50 over and T20. Fast forward 4 years, we're now one of the worst teams.
I'd be laughing if I was Johnny Bairstow and Ben Stokes, laughing.
We've had 3 remarkably bad tournaments. And what is kind of the joke, what makes it incredible for me, is you look at that team on paper, 1 to 11.
It's very angry.
These are seriously good players.
Don't think the mould's right. Don't think the mould's right. Don't think it's right.
I agree.
And I'll go further. Goodbye, Joss Buttler, no longer the captain.
Joss Buttler's just been asked about his future as England captain, and he said, no knee-jerk reactions now, but we need to have serious discussions. My gut tells me Joss Buttler's going to stand down as England captain. This is now the 3rd major tournament he's been captain of, and we've ultimately failed. So I think it'd be the right decision for Butler to maybe step away. Also for the good of himself. This is England's best ever white ball batsman.
And I will tell you who the next captain will be.
It's going to be Harry Brook, of course.
Of course it's going to be. I told you that a year ago and you laughed at me.
He's the vice captain. Of course it's going to be Harry Brook. Butler needs to step away from the captaincy, carry on playing, and they've almost got to do another reset. They're not going to play white ball cricket now for a long time.
It's very easy what you do. You bring back the best cricketer in England. He manages to. Ben Stokes should be in the.
Of course,
get lost, mate. It's a 50 over game.
Ben Stokes isn't here because he's not fit, because he's not good enough. He's not here because of injury. Trust me, Joss Buttler will love Ben Stokes available. But unfortunately, with his injuries at the moment, he's only pretty much playing Test match cricket. They've got to take a breath and almost go again. Harry Brook, young guy, the future. Give him the captaincy, and the serious questions now have got to be asked over players like Liam Livingstone. Is he good enough?
I don't know. Anyway, listen, I want to do football. England are a disgrace at cricket, and it's just another thing about this country that gets on my bits. Talk Radio exclusive last night, 7 o'clock. Fantastic commentary on the radio. Wolves, Fulham.
Good win for Fulham.
Good win. We didn't get any games right last night. We're going to have a go tonight. But tonight, let me tell you, at 8:15, Liverpool, Newcastle from Anfield. The league leaders leading by 11 points. Arnie Slot today. I'm not bothered about his touchline ban or fine. I'm not bothered about that. I'm bothered about tonight my second team, Newcastle. Many of my friends, big
Can't
Toon
have
Army.
two teams,
oh,
mate.
shut up, man.
Can't have two teams.
Listen, I've had 3 wives. At the end, see what I did there?
Have you had 3 wives?
Yeah, I'm on number 3. So listen.
This is the three and done, I'm assuming.
Well, listen, yes, hopefully. Of course. Listen, there's punching, there's being with Victoria.
You are punching, I've seen that.
Victoria's the legend. Right, listen, Liverpool, Newcastle tonight, exclusively on Talk, from 7 o'clock until 10. Talk sport commentary, going to be amazing. How do you see the game?
Liverpool win. Best team in the country, best team in the world right
It's a draw.
now. They're looking
It's a draw all day long.
I'm going 2-1 Liverpool.
It's a draw all day long. I'll tell you why. Newcastle, they've something to play for now. Of course, it's the Carabao Cup, the FA Cup. I think that's a draw. Let's run through the fixtures. As we said, Talk Radio exclusive, 8:15, Liverpool, Newcastle. After the show, the build-up from TalkSport.
And Kev, is Kev still doing a show, or is he on
Kev, of course.
We can't forget
he'll
Kev.
be on Talk's YouTube channel.
Brilliant.
And also Smart TV. So Kev, still from 7.
Brilliant.
But on the radio,
What a
title
night.
contenders Liverpool live against Newcastle. Brentford, Everton.
Going to go for a draw here. Everton in really good form. Brentford's home form dwindling a little bit. Still on the fence.
Everton
go for a
win.
score draw.
Everton win.
Okay.
Spurs, Man City.
Oh, do you know what? I'm going Spurs. Spurs are in good form.
It's a draw. It's got a draw written all over
Spurs
it.
are in good form, JK. Relegation
Now I'm going to
battle.
shot you. Manchester United in a relegation battle against Ipswich Town, fighting for their lives.
15th and
Kieran
19th.
McKenna, who was a coach with Jose Mourinho at Old Trafford, a point to prove. Amorim, amidst the quality of the team and the cost of the team's gone down since he got there. I'm going for Ipswich to shock Manchester United tonight.
Yeah, you know what? I'm with you. I can't back Man United. Never back Man United. They're 15th. They're awful. They picked up 15 points and a possible 42 under Ruben Amorim. He inherited a team who were 13th in the table, and somehow he's made them worse.
I know.
That feels almost impossible to do.
Yeah.
And he's done it.
It's like you've managed on this, but who'd have thought that you could make this programme worse? But you've managed it.
I'll take that. Fair enough.
Nottingham Forest Arsenal going to shot you game draw. It's a draw.
This is... I mean, Nottingham Forest have lost 3 of their last 4 games. Arsenal are done now, aren't they? I'll sit on the fence. This has 0-0 written all over it, I think.
I think that has a draw. But the big one, of course, a Talk Radio exclusive, Liverpool-Newcastle. You doing the commentary? You got the main gig?
I'm doing a YouTube show tonight. So I'm doing a YouTube watch-along on TalkSport's YouTube. There'll be live commentary on TalkSport, obviously, as you mentioned, and on Talk. So I'll be doing a watch-along. We've got 3 or 4 different people in the studio. So hopefully, Jez, 5 big games tonight. Should be a really good night of football.
West Ham not playing?
You're playing tomorrow night. Leicester at home. Got to win that, haven't you?
If we don't beat Leicester, it's all over. It's really interesting, though, if you look at the table. We're 16th. You win 2 games, you're 11th.
Can I also tell you?
Yes.
5 points separate 3rd place down to 10th place. Incredibly. So the league title feels like it's done. I even think the relegation battle, Wolves, 5 clear of Ipswich and Leicester, I don't see that being overturned. 5 points. I don't remember at this stage of the season.
Who comes 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th, quickly?
2nd Arsenal, 3rd Man City, 4th Newcastle.
Ooh, Chelsea don't make it?
Maybe just Newcastle.
I think Man City are struggling, man.
I know,
They're as consistent as treacle.
I know. I don't know
but
why
it makes it fantastic.
It does make it fantastic.
Watford to be promoted to the Premiership.
I think Watford are going to come 7th, just miss outside on the playoffs. Sorry,
devastation.
Big win, though, on Sunday. He was there, wasn't he, producer Ryan? He was at Vicarage Road, wasn't he?
Do you know what he said? He said, it's fine, I don't want to go up.
Do the accent. I quite like Green's voice. It's actually quite good.
I don't want to go up. I'm happy being in the Championship. I will say one thing. Watford battered Luton the other day, didn't they? Absolutely battered the scum of Luton. That's what he wanted me to say.
Oh, that's bang out of order.
Apparently it's a local derby.
Big derby, that is.
Yeah.
In that part of the
but I didn't get a chance to just do it. How good were West Ham against Arsenal?
Can I mention the games last night very, very quickly?
Yes, you can.
Chelsea thumped Southampton, but I think we predicted that.
Yeah.
Aston Villa losing 4-1 at Palace.
Wheels have come off at Villa.
They're such an inconsistent team this season.
Yeah.
Big win for Fulham going to Wolves and winning, and also Brighton being Bournemouth at home. So many teams. Villa are that sort of team where they can go 3 or 4 games, they're looking really good. You think they're going to go, and they completely fall. I feel like Newcastle are also similar. They go through spells this season where they're looking at the old Newcastle.
I've got a minute. I'm going to tell you something. I believe that Newcastle will win either the Carabao Cup or the FA Cup.
Which one?
I don't know. It doesn't matter.
What do you mean? Which one?
I think they might beat Liverpool in the Carabao Cup final.
Eddie Howe. I'd be happy for Eddie Howe. I think Eddie Howe is one of the most underrated managers in the country.
And his wife's amazing. She sits and watches every game with those 3 kids and
Does
doesn't
your partner
move
sit and watch every one of your shows?
Sorry?
Does your partner
Vic doesn't watch this. What are you
Oh, she
talking
doesn't
about?
watch this?
Too busy feeding the kids and rushing around. Her job's far harder than mine. I get to sit here and have fun. You're amazing. Talk
You're a
Sport
good
tonight
man.
from 7 o'clock.
Can I have
It's
a
an
biscuit?
exclusive. Liverpool, have a biscuit for God's sake. I'm trying to do it. Liverpool, Newcastle, live and exclusive here on Talk from 7 o'clock. And Kevin O'Sullivan, don't forget his programme on Talk's YouTube channel. Also on your smart TV. It's almost 6 o'clock. We're live across the UK. I'm going to have rich tea and another cup of tea. You can make calls. We've got Brendan O'Neill on the way. 0344 499 1000. What do you want me to ask him? We will do the news at 6 next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome, my friends. Hour 3 of Drive on Talk for Wednesday. We're live across the UK on the station. That is, of course, about free speech and common sense. On screen, if you're on YouTube right now, you can see it. I'll tell you orally, pardon. You can get on phoning our Jodie, 0344 499 1000. She said to me just then, Jez, will you always have me by your side? Of course I will, Jod. 0344 499 1000. Who else can put my thing in my ear and get me digested biscuits? 0344 499 1000. Text to 87222. I have to say, Ryan's not very happy. Hasn't had any voice notes tonight. You've got an hour. Send him a voice note on WhatsApp. Start it with, hi, Ryan, you're amazing, and so are Watford. See what we get. Absolutely nothing. 0344 499 1000. Text to 87222. Hello to Debbie Dobson. Debbie Dobson. I don't know why I'm doing that. Criminal charges should be brought against the BBC for funding terrorists. Connie, on the cricket, you might have heard, England just dropped out of the Champions Trophy in cricket by losing to Palestine. What? What is wrong with me? By losing to Afghanistan? That's right, the country that's run by the Taliban. We lost. That's how bad we are. But many people said before the tournament that we should have boycotted it and we shouldn't have gone because of the way that the Taliban treats women and homosexuals and a lot of other people. Couldn't agree more. Connie simply says, Isn't it amazing how the UK boycotted South African sports? ... Lynn says, England's cricket. Shame on you all. There's a lot of anger that England went and played that game in the first place, and there's a lot of people thinking maybe you got your just desserts. 0344 499 1000. As you know, if you're a regular to this 3-day-a-week attempt at trying to do a radio and television programme, and we appreciate the 11 of you that have made it, your listening acceptance thing, Wednesday at 6 o'clock is my favourite. This is one of the most brilliant people to talk to. I love having on the show. Brendan O'Neill, chief political writer of Spiked. Brendan, how are you this week, my friend?
Hi, Jeremy. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm all right. I feel like we're going to have one of our most angry chats for a long time, because I don't really know where to start, because we can start with the cricket. This country's on its arse. Let's start, if we can. He says calmly, yesterday, dreary, slimy Starmer stood up and said, we're going to, in that voice, I'm going to take some money from international development and I'm going to improve the defences of the United Kingdom to the tune of £13.4 billion. This is because I know the world has changed. Many people said, he's been strong-armed into this by President Trump against the fact he's going on Thursday. Does he mean this? Hold on a second. In 2021, he was tweeting that international aid should never be touched. The horrible Tories were killing people, innocent people. But anyway, that's happening. Today, rather interestingly, it turns out, because Kemi Badenoch was pushing him Prime Minister's Question Time, although she was reading, which annoys me, I'm doing it now, she wanted clarity and transparency on whether any of that money was actually going to be used to give to Mauritius, because apparently we've got to give them the Chagos Islands and £9 billion. And, like the slime ball he is, Starmer on 3 occasions couldn't actually answer the question, Brendan, which tells us all everything we need to know, doesn't it?
Oh, it really does. You know, he's such a slippery character, and he not only does he push through crazy policies, including the Chagos Islands policy, which everyone knows is mad, giving away this island, giving it to Mauritius, having to give them loads and loads of money as well. Everyone knows it's crazy. Not only does he do things like that, but he can't give a straight answer about the things that he does. He can't give a straight answer about the decisions that he makes. So he takes decisions that have a very destructive impact on this country and our interests overseas, and then he's not even honest when people grill him about it. This is a politician who makes bad choices and gives very bad explanations for them.
I don't understand the Chagos thing. You perhaps know more than me. This is an island that, in terms of security, Diego Garcia being the area that the Americans are very keen. It's a hugely important area on that island for our security. Because some international law judge, whoever, solicitor has jumped up and said, oh, I think, Mauritians should be given this. Starmer, because he's obsessed with European law and that globalist ideology, is giving away something that's British. But he's also at a time when this country is sinking in debt and sinking through the lack of investment in so many of our services and things that the British people need and want and deserve, is giving them £9 billion. Nobody can explain to me, maybe you can, Brendan, what we get from giving the Chagos Islands and £9 billion away.
As far as I can tell, we don't really get anything. We lose a lot and we don't gain anything in response. But you know who really dislikes this policy is the Chagosian people themselves.
Oh, right.
They hate what Starmer's done. They've been arguing for the right to have their island back for a long time. And we can argue the merits of that case. Should it be a property of Britain or should it be a property of the Chagosian people? That's a good discussion to have.
Yep.
But what Starmer did was give it to Mauritius, hand it over to Mauritius. He annoyed some of his international partners. He's annoyed the people of Britain, who are wondering why we're giving away this island and £9 billion. And he's really annoyed the Chagosian people themselves, who are thinking, hold on, this is our island. So across the board, he's made a decision which, as you say, might conform to some obscure law internationally, but it irritates everyone in the real world. And that really does sum up Keir Starmer. He's a jumped-up human rights lawyer posing as a political leader. He loves to follow the letter of the law rather than leading with moral vision and political principle, and that really is him in a nutshell.
Couldn't agree more. Interestingly, though, there is perhaps, maybe I'm wrong, you'll tell me, in my mind there is a really important issue here. I don't think the deal will happen. I think that when he arrives tomorrow in Washington, D.C., because let's be honest, he jumped the whole of Europe, was certainly led by the United Kingdom. As somebody said earlier, George W. Bush, Joe Biden, they were all told. They all told Europe, you need to spend more on defence. Nothing. 30 days and the orange man baby's got Starmer going, I'm going to make that money. I'll have a wager with anybody that Donald Trump says to him, you ain't using that money, by the way, to sell the Chagos Islands. I don't want that deal anyway. You spend it on your own or I'll pull back even more. I think that Trump will call shot. I think that, I mean, I could be totally wrong, but I think that Starmer showed himself to be at the mercy of Donald Trump straight away. Really do.
But it's so funny, isn't it? Because Starmer and David Lammy and Ed Miliband and all these other nerds who now unfortunately run our country, they've spent the past few years slagging off Donald Trump and calling him a fascist and an idiot and evil and all that kind of stuff. Now he's running the show. He's whipping the West into shape, especially Europe, which he feels is lagging behind on its responsibility.
And he's right. He's right.
He's right. They're lagging behind on their commitment to NATO, on their commitment to defence spending, on their ability to protect themselves. I often think in my darkest moments, maybe it's a sign of getting older, what would happen if someone invaded Britain? Who would stand up for us? We've got some wonderful soldiers in our armies, but they are often let down by political leaders who don't give them the resources that they need, don't treat them with the respect that they deserve. And instead, remember that advert from a few years ago where the British Army said, we want snowflakes in our army. We want people who can have emotional intelligence. We want people who feel their emotions. No, we want soldiers who have muscle and bravery and courage and who are willing to defend this country. They are out there, of course, but they're constantly let down by politicians like Starmer and others.
It's interesting. I mean, I've read this to every person I've had on this week for a reason. I'll read it to you, Brendan. This was sent to me. So, Jez, the leaders of 500 million Europeans are waiting for 340 million Americans to protect them from 140 million Russians who haven't been able to win against 30 million Ukrainians in 3 years. I think that says it all. I think that Donald Trump has every right to say, I'm concentrating on China, illegal immigration, making my people safer and better off. That's my country. That's what I stood for. I am happy to be part of this alliance, but I am not going to watch you strip bare your military, bring in ideology and throw money at the most ridiculous causes and expect Uncle Sam, when you click your fingers, to defend you. The world's not like that anymore. And I go further. Said it yesterday, bud. You can have a go at Starmer. I'm also going to have a go at 14 years of Tory rule, starting with David Cameron. They stripped the military, and that is a disgraceful part of the 14 years of Tory rule, by a merry mile.
I couldn't agree more. And it goes across the board, across Europe. We are led by people who've spent the past 20 years or more pursuing ridiculous woke policies, gutting the military, teaching young people to be hyper vulnerable and hyper fragile so they couldn't even stand up for themselves, never mind for the countries they live in. Yeah. It's pursued all these policies that are very destructive to the social and moral fabric of the nation. And then they sit back and think, oh, well, if Russia ever comes here, or when ISIS takes over, whatever else it might happen, Uncle Sam will come and save us. America will come and save us.
Not anymore. Really good. The other thing that happened, and love about drive time, is you're in the middle of this sort of, breaking news happens all the time for some completely unknown reason in the afternoon. John Sweeney, I don't even know what his name is, the latest First Minister of Scotland, watched Nicola Sturgeon die on the hill of the trans debate by allowing... Anyway, today, John Sweeney, and I've had so many calls from Scotland, has backed the right of trans people, Brendan, who self-identify. They haven't had a medical procedure. They've not changed legally their gender. They simply go, I'd like to be a woman. They can identify simply like that and use female toilets and changing rooms. He says that the guidance for trans employees, which states they should choose to use the facilities they feel most comfortable in. I said, as a father of teenage girls, Russell Quirk, who was on at the beginning, a father of teenage girls, and a couple of female callers with teenage girls have said the following. The truth is this. You are going to allow a man with a penis, whether he's in a dress or not, to come into a changing room and use the facilities in front of my teenage daughter. All those people who quite rightly go on and on about female rights, good, women's rights, important. That apparently goes out the window. I mean, yeah. This is appalling, and it brought Sturgeon down, and it just shows this really angry people on the phone saying this man doesn't understand. That's a safety issue. But no, we get stuck on this, oh, you're being rude to trans people. No, I'm not. I'm talking about women's right, teenage girls' rights to feel safe.
Absolutely. You know, we used to call this indecent exposure. When men used to whip out their bits in front of women or girls who didn't want to see them, we called it indecent exposure. We called it flashing. Now we are compelled to call it trans rights. Now we are supposed to stand up like John Swinney and other politicians in the West say the same thing and argue for the right of men who claim to be women to get undressed in front of women and girls. I think it is an outrageous suggestion. It was always an outrageous policy. And there is so much discussion at the moment about the death of wokeness. You know, following the election of Donald Trump, following various changes that have taken place in the West over the past few months or the past year, people are saying woke is dead. And we must never forget how destructive wokeness was. Wokeness led to the imprisonment of male rapists with women. Wokeness led to men getting undressed in front of girls in changing rooms. Wokeness led to the destruction of women's sports because big hulking men were claiming to be women and were taking women's medals. This was an incredibly destructive, misogynistic ideology, and lots of politicians have come to their senses and said we don't want it anymore. So for Scotland to continue pursuing these policies, I think, is ridiculous. And John Swinney is in for a rude awakening if he thinks he can get away with this.
And because I love the way your brain works and the way you put it, what would you say to the, let's say, a couple of activists I know who are into women's rights but get so hung up on this whole trans thing? You're being disgraceful. You're implying that every trans person is aggressive. Or what's your argument? To me, it's black and white. I don't care if you want to transition, but I don't think you should be changing in front of teenage girls. What about those teenage girls? What about women's right to decide?
It's very simple. It is not transphobic to stand up for the rights of women and girls. Yeah. And those rights include the right to their own spaces if they need to get undressed, or if they need to take refuge from violence, or if they need to go to a rape shelter. All these things that we've recognised for decades are essential to women's lives in modern Britain and the modern world. We know that they need these spaces, that they are their own. No man should be allowed into those spaces, regardless of how he identifies, regardless of what he calls himself or how he dresses. That is a fundamental tenet of women's liberty in the modern world. And to chip away at that in the name of trans rights is just to sell women down the river. And you know what? There are loads of women in Britain who are sick and tired of the transgender ideology, not because they are transphobic, but because they want to defend rights for themselves and for their daughters, and I fully support them.
Completely agree. A couple of biggies still to go. Do you want to go net zero or the BBC? Your shout, Mr. O'Neill.
Oh, BBC. I love a bit of BBC bashing.
Oh, God. We all know about this documentary, of course, that was made at Gaza, the view of what was happening. I was away, the BBC giving 400 grand to an independent production company. Turns out it was voiced by a 13-year-old. It was portrayed as that. Turns out he's the son of a Hamas official. People jumping up and down saying, hold on a second, Hamas is a terrorist organisation, not the BBC will say that. Yesterday, footage of a cameraman from that shoot laughing and cheering when the footage of those horrendous attacks on the 7th of October. Today, news of the BBC back in whitewashing the views of participants in the documentary after repeatedly mistranslating references to the Jews and omitting phrases of jihad. It's been revealed that at least on 5 occasions, Brendan, the words Yahud, Arabic for Jew or Jews, was changed to Israel or Israeli forces or removed from the subtitles altogether. The BBC's got itself in an absolute mess here. Another example of how they I believe, have this ideology and always have had this ideology. And for me, there's a bigger question. Somebody made a really, really interesting point. It is against the law to not pay your licence fee. You will be prosecuted in court. Is it not against the law to fund a terrorist organisation? And if any of this £400,000, even a small amount, went to Hamas, that's come from the British taxpayer. That doesn't seem right.
It's awful. I think this is one of the worst things the BBC has ever done. And what we have today are a bunch of lovies and celebrities like Gary Lineker coming out in defence of this documentary on the day that Shiri Bibas and her 2 young children were buried in Israel. They haven't said a word about the murder of that young family of Jews by the neo-fascists of Hamas. And instead, on the day that they are put to rest, They are talking about how wonderful this documentary is and why the BBC should reinstate it. It is sickening, grotesque hypocrisy and double standards. This documentary is one of the worst things the BBC has ever put out. It was, as you say, it was narrated by the son of a leading figure in Hamas, the movement that carried out the worst slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust. It was mistranslated throughout. There are at least 5 occasions in the documentary where participants insulted the Jews and accused the Jews of doing evil things, but the BBC changed it so that they said Israel and Israeli forces rather than the Jews. The BBC whitewashed the Jew bashing of some of the participants in this documentary. It sanitized their views to make them more palatable to a BBC audience. What the BBC has essentially done it's whitewashed the truth about Gaza. It has withheld the truth from its viewers about what the people in Gaza said in this documentary, and it has provided moral cover for Hamas and its supporters. This is really a new low for the BBC, and I don't think it's good enough to take this documentary off iPlayer. Heads need to roll over this.
It's really interesting. I announced this about half an hour ago. Can't go into any more details, but Tim Davie, who's under enormous pressure. I mean, you only have to go. I mean, look, honestly, where do you want to start? Hugh Edwards is still being paid his salary and is still getting his pension, and they do nothing about it. If you don't pay your licence fee, you get prosecuted. We can go back to Savile, Rolf Harris. We can talk about. God, there's all sorts of stories, but I agree with you. I can reveal, and we know this, we can't go into detail, that Tim Davie is going to come out under even more greater pressure tomorrow. That's a fact, because they ain't going to... No, the newscasters and the newspapers and the news organisations in this country are not going to let this go. Tim Davie is in charge of an organisation that, in essence, in my humble opinion, takes £172 from each person in this country, each household. If you don't give it, you get fined, you get prosecuted. With that money, as a state broadcaster, I want balance. I actually genuinely, hand on heart, want balance. I want to hear the Israeli side and I want to hear the Palestinian side. You don't hear both sides. They are a biased organisation. If the people who want to argue with me come and go, what about you? That's your choice to listen to talk. I have no choice but to pay my licence fee and have this bile thrown down my throat. And what will happen, I'm not condoning this in any which way at all, but what will happen is more and more people, the Lovies, they need to wake up. You know, the Hugh Grants and all these people, all of them, right? They need to understand. People will stop. It's defunct. In 3 years, I said it earlier, it cannot survive the way it's going. It cannot. And these people do not. They're so up their own backsides, they don't believe when I say this and when you say that this is true. The BBC is not fit for purpose the way it is, and it will not survive. It can't survive. It can't survive.
No, absolutely. And, you know, I'm not one of those people who thinks the BBC is the worst thing in the world.
Neither am I. Neither am I, but what they do and how they do it.
The BBC does some good stuff, unbelievably. It still does, even with all the dross that it puts out. But it is shooting itself in the foot again and again by making itself into a mouthpiece of the kind of woke middle classes rather than seeking to represent the public in its broadest sense. So it's become a propaganda outlet. We saw that around Brexit. We saw it around various woke issues. And now we're seeing it around the Israel-Palestine question as well. The BBC is meant to be the public broadcaster. It is meant to take into consideration the views and the ideas of everyone in the country, but it's too often just become a mouthpiece for one narrow section of society. That's what's turning people off. That's what's making people think, well, I'm not going to pay my license fee. Why should I be compelled by law to fund a media organisation that treats me with contempt? That is what a lot of people are now thinking.
I love my Wednesdays. We love having you on. Brendan O'Neill, Chief Political Writer of Spike. Thank you very much indeed for being on Talk Drive. We're live across the United Kingdom. What is it, 6:22? 0344 499 1000. We have a voice note that apparently is going to make Ryan very happy. Gemma, go.
Hi, Ryan. You're amazing. And so are Watford and Fulham and West Ham and Villa. Don't prescribe to me what to say, because I've not got an auto cue. I don't play snooker. I play cricket. I umpire cricket. Oh, Gemma from somewhere near the land of the dead.
we were really sort of quite surprised and, well, maybe not surprised, but certainly shocked and disappointed to see that when you take things in the round, this year's mayoral budget is spending more on climate and net zero related measures than it is on policing. Now, the mayor has said in his press releases that nothing is more important to him than keeping Londoners safe. Now, we obviously disagree over whether he's successfully achieving that or not, but if you're saying something is your number one priority, you would expect that to be the thing you're spending most money on, wouldn't you? I mean, certainly that's how I would.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Back 6:25. We're live across the UK. Talk Drive for Wednesday, JK till 7. At 7 o'clock, we split. Title contenders Liverpool in the Premier League taking on Newcastle at Anfield. Live and exclusive here on Talk, a Talk Sport commentary. But Kev O'Sullivan, don't you fret. His amazing programme on Talk's YouTube channel and your smart TV from 7 o'clock tonight. Right now, though, delighted to welcome our next guest, Ben, very posh, Ben Harris-Quinney, political commentator. Welcome to Talk Drive, my friend. How are you?
Thank you. Not too bad, Jeremy.
Looking smart again. Look at you. Honestly, you put me to shame, don't you? Every single time you come on. Ben, I want to talk to you about net zero because I missed. We didn't have time with the amazing Brendan O'Neill. I want to talk about this net zero madness, this net zero drive, means that millions of us face, apparently by 2035, installing heat pumps, which cost 20 grand, buying electric cars that depreciate in value, you can't get insured and they're not particularly great. We're going to have to eat less meat and less dairy, and apparently it's going to cost 320 billion quid, which means that our energy bills will go through the roof and we'll end up with less money. All of this because Ed Miliband and his tribe of eco-zealots have promised to slash energy bills, which is a lie because they've soared. Can you help me out here, man? Because I don't think anybody wants this tripe. Do you?
No, look, and you heard it here first. I'll tell you, it's going to cost a lot more than 320 billion. The costs will run into the trillions. And you can see that. I mean, the Institute for Government has said that they estimate the cost to be 1.4 trillion. That will be an underestimate. McKinsey has said globally the cost will be something like 375 trillion, which, to put that in perspective, I know it gets a bit confusing with billions and trillions, that it all becomes meaningless. But that's more than anything has ever cost, more than the Second World War cost economically, more than anything in our history in terms of policy would have cost. And it will cost that because we see it with Ed Miliband, don't we? We've been told for 20 years nigh on that net zero is going to mean cheaper energy, a green revolution, and we're all going to be richer. And what happens year on year? We hear, a bit of bad news, energy bills are going up 7%. Sorry about that. And they're already, of course, sky high. Since we've seen net zero come onto the policy agenda, energy costs are up by over 500%. Since the policy's been called net zero, they're up by over 200%. And that gives you an idea of the way this is headed. If you read between the lines, and you mentioned it there with eating less meat, it means less everything.
But can I in layperson's terms, sorry about that, I'm just being honest, can you explain to me, right, this drive for heat pumps, electric cars, no meat, no dairy, blah, 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 this ridiculous cost that does nothing to improve energy bills, in fact, makes it worse. What is it for? Is it ideological BS? Because in my humble opinion, 1.5 trillion, 320 billion, we've got people who can't see a doctor. We've got veterans on the streets. We've got a creaking NHS service. We've got a social justice system that's buggered. We've got a court system that's creaking. Why is this obsession, in my mind, diminishing what we should be spending our money on and concentrating on?
Well, as you say, the crazy thing about it is that there are no tangible results. The government aren't saying, and then, the global temperature will reduce by 1 degree, 1.5 degrees because the UK does this. Alongside this, we're talking about going to nuclear war with Russia. It's unbelievable the disconnect, as you say, between what the government is saying on this policy and so many others, like we want growth, but we're going to see energy bills go up by a huge amount and everyone is going to be eating less meat and going on fewer holidays. So how are you going to get growth? It simply
Do you think they listen to Ben? Do you think they listen to the British people? Well, help me out, because you know more about this. Do you think that if you had a referendum tomorrow, the British people would support this net zero madness, or do you think that they would absolutely refute it?
No, and you can tell that because of the way the government, and successive governments, by the way, not just this Labour government,
that's true.
the last Conservative government as well, have put this to the public. They've basically said, do you want a nicer environment? And everyone said yes. What they haven't done is publish the costs. And that's what we always need to know. But we especially need to know that with the most expensive policy in history. So we do need a referendum on it. And we need those arguments to come out. And we need to make clear to people, you realise this means you'll no longer be able to afford a car. This means you'll no longer be able to afford to heat your house in the winter. This means you'll have to give up meat for half the week. This means you won't be going on any holidays anymore. I think when people understand that and understand that results of this that they're proposing is completely untangible, and it relies on all other countries in the world going further and faster than us, which they won't, and then it relies upon that science being right. And I think none of those things are true. The temperature won't change. What it will do is bankrupt this country.
Bankrupt this country. One other subject. Great to have you on, by the way. Actually, we should give a mention. By the way, actually, before we finish speaking about net zero, I should absolutely give a mention to the amazing people at BP. BP led the way. We're going to go green. We're going to do this today. They've gone, actually, renewable energy investments. It's a pile of old tripe. We're going back to oil and gas. What does that tell you? That's just to get in Donald Trump's good books, isn't it? Because they all want those American contracts, as somebody said it to me earlier on the show. I look at this ideology and I look at all these thoughts and all these things, and I look across the pond and I think this is coming to this country, a wake-up call for these organisations. I've talked about the BBC in a tick, that seem to think they're right when your average man and woman in the street, you know, not in the Islington bubble, Sir Keir Starmer, above there, you know, because the country's quite big. I think politicians aren't listening. I don't think they've listened for a long, long time, but I think they've got a rude awakening coming, don't you?
Well, with BP, I think it was the shareholder vote that changed their view, and unfortunately it means that they've had a more democratic process than the British public have on net zero. So let's see a bit more of that.
BBC, you know the story, the documentary about Gaza, it turns out was voiced by the son of an official. Many people saying, hold on a minute, £400,000 to make a documentary that was in essence Hamas propaganda. You won't call them a terrorist organisation. There's videos of a cameraman celebrating the attacks on Jews on the 7th of October. And lo and behold, right on cue, Gary Lineker and 500 of his TV industry figures have today signed a petition and a letter accusing the BBC of bowing to censorship and racism by removing this intelligent look at Gaza from their iPlayer. What the hell's going on with the world, Ben?
Yeah, the Gary Lineker that promised to be non-political, of course. I mean, look, obviously, whatever your views on this issue, the BBC are supposed to be there to produce non-biased journalism, balanced journalism that looks at all sides and certainly doesn't include the offspring of key perpetrators in a conflict. In a documentary about it. It clearly fails on basic standards.
And apparently today they've been accused of whitewashing. Have you seen this as well? Whitewashing the views of participants in the programme after repeatedly mistranslating references to the Jews and admitting the phrase of jihad. It's been proven that on 5 occasions, Ben, the words Yehud or Yehudi, Arabic for Jew or Jews, were changed to Israel or Israeli forces. I mean, this is Brendan O'Neill said this is one of the biggest faux pas. I mean, it's a disgraceful example of how our state broadcaster, I'm afraid, is not an unbiased state broadcaster, and it will lead to further questions from people who say, so I have to pay 172 quid, otherwise I get prosecuted. But some of that money might have gone to fund a terrorist organisation, but I thought that was something you could be prosecuted for as well.
And that's whether you watch the BBC or not, which is the most ridiculous thing about it. I mean, it's so outdated. That concept, you need a licence to watch a television and the BBC get your money either way. Absolute nonsense. Obviously, that needs to go. But on this issue, I think there needs to be a major values pushback because, again, you can collect as many celebrities as you want signing letters, but you have got to have a basic commitment to your BBC charter, to your statutes, but also to journalism as a concept. And if you're using a narrator for a documentary who's the son of a senior member of the Hamas government, obviously that has failed. And the fact that you we're supposed to believe that they didn't spot that was an error. I mean, that asks questions of journalism in itself.
It could not.
What else are they going to be finding out?
Could not agree.
But it's clearly a failure, and it can't go out.
Completely agree with you. Thank you so much indeed. Lovely to have you on. Ben Harris-Quinney, political commentator, 25 to 7. The inquiry into England's one-day cricket team, who, by the way, in the last half an hour have lost to Afghanistan. The Taliban-sponsored Afghanistan. Many people saying we shouldn't have been in that tournament, the Champions Trophy, because we should have boycotted it because of what Afghanistan does, yes, to women and homosexuals and minority groups. That we should have, but actually we've got our comeuppance and we've lost to Afghanistan, and I think Joss Butler is probably on the way. Hello to Sue Jez. I have a heat pump and an EV, and I do have to say I love both, but we're all electric, and they are better than storage heaters, but I only live in a small house and I don't go far in my car, so they both work for me. Interesting. Jane Bates. Jez, so they're going to tax us and get rid of the licence fee, and hopefully Tim Davey, Lineker and all the lefty ever paid love is probably not talk. We don't want snowflakes in our army. But I couldn't agree more. Gembuff. Is her name Gemma? I don't even know what that means. 25 to 7. Don't forget at 7 o'clock tonight, live, Premier League action returns to talk. Liverpool, Newcastle from Anfield. Exclusive TalkSport commentary on Talk tonight. One night only. We did it last night, we'll do it tonight. If you want to still watch Kev O'Sullivan's programme, you probably do, from 7 o'clock. Talk's YouTube channel or your smart TV. Normal service resumed tomorrow from 7, but tonight, Liverpool, Newcastle, live and exclusive on Talk at 7 o'clock.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
No, I'm joking. A very good evening. 23 minutes to 7 o'clock. Who will say good morning to you is Mike Graham. Back tomorrow 6 a.m. It's the only way to wake up in the morning. Morning glory. By the way, if you tune in, you could get your hands, this is true, on a bumper sticker. He just did this as a bit of fun. About 50,000, no, 5,000 have already gone out. People have to put the sticker on their bumper. It's a picture of his face and send a picture of... Just listen to him in the morning. It's the only way to wake up. It's amazing. My kids on the school run now want to listen to Mike Graham's Morning Glory, 6 till 10, only here on Talk. 22 minutes to 7 o'clock. We're live across the UK. It's been a long time since I spoke to this man. Used to be my MP, former chair, the Defence Select Committee, Tobias Elwood. Tobias, a very good evening. How are you, sir? Brilliant. OK, so
good evening to you.
Oh, you are there. I thought, good Lord, he's lost his seat, he's lost his connection, everything's gone wrong. How are you, sir? You all right?
I'm good. Good to see you again.
And you, my friend. So much going on, but I want to concentrate on yesterday and today, really, because you will be able to strip this down. Yesterday, Slimy Starmer stood up and said, I know I tweeted in 21 that the Tories were horrendous human beings to even contemplate dropping the international aid budget from 0.7 to 0.5% to fund whatever. And I said these were terrible people. But I've decided, because the world has changed, to do the same. I'm going to drop it from 0.5 to 0.3 and spend £13.4 billion, about 6 billion in effect. But that figure on our defences, because the country is facing a different threat. The world has changed, and Donald Trump has arrived in the White House and said, I'm not going to pay all this money while you lot strip your military bare and pay for ridiculous things. I've made a commitment, and that's what's going to happen, something I actually agree with. Today, Cami Badenoch, the new Tory leader, used her Prime Minister's question 6 of them to read off a piece of paper again, but basically pressurising Sir Keir Starmer to explain where that money is going to be spent. Is it going to be on personnel? Is it going to be recruitment? What about veterans? What about equipment, drones, logistics, whatever it is? Or was it in fact going to be used in part to fund this ridiculous, let's give the Chagos Islands to Mauritius and give them £9 billion? And of course, in true political style, our Prime Minister couldn't answer the question 3 times, which would lead many like me to suspect that he is in fact going to use some of this money for that ridiculous deal. Thoughts on all of it would be delightful. Tobias Elwood.
Well, good to see you again. I mean, the bigger picture is I welcome the advance in our defence budget. Whatever perspective you have, there needs to be a generational change in our thinking. We've enjoyed 3 decades of relative peace. That's gone. Since the end of the Cold War, it's been pretty good. Now there's a clear statement that we've entered a new, more complex and dangerous chapter. Conflicts are growing. We've spoken about that many times. Authoritarianism is on the rise, and the war in Europe could easily escalate. And we are vulnerable. Our defense posture has changed little in the last couple of decades. Land, air and sea, all assets are too small there. Our stockpiles are too low. We've slid a lot across the table to Ukraine, and we still have a dated view of war. Nobody can be of any doubt that our global instability, the rising number of complex threats and so forth that we now face means we've got to invest more in defense. Or we may have to go it alone. We don't know what America is going to do in Europe as well. And that grey zone area that you and I have spoken about many times, cutting the cables in the channels, the cyber attacks and so forth. And there's a huge delta, a massive gap between the size of our force required to handle the growing threats and what we have now. So that is good that we're investing more. I would push back a little bit on this taking money away from the aid budgets, because I appreciate it's been poorly spent, but well-targeted aid, that is what soft power is all about. And it actually prevents wars. It improves governance, it improves security, prevents the fires from growing in the first place. And many of the places, migration is something you spend a lot of time focusing on. Many of those places where they're coming from is actually because situations there have got out of hand. Where do these people go? And when we pull out of those projects in Libya, it's Russia that moves in. When we pull out of those projects in Congo, it's China that moves in. And guess what? They've got very different agendas as well. So I'm pleased to see the defense budget is going up. I am, as I say, hesitant because soft power and hard power are actually 2 sides of the same coin.
I get that, but there's much I want to say, and you've always been straight with me. Let's talk about the defence budget. Whether it comes from foreign aid or not, I happen to think that's a good thing. You disagree, but we should meet somewhere in the middle. I just want to talk about the defence budget. You were a very vocal person about we need to spend more. You've always been like that. Ben Wallace was very local. James Heapy was very vocal. It seems to me that many people over the past however many years have been vocal. In fact, it's also fair to say that several American presidents, Biden, George W. Bush and others, have implored Europe to get their hands dirtier, if you like, and spend more money on defence. And it hasn't happened. It's very easy, and being balanced here, to lay this all on Sir Keir Starmer. The Tory government were in power for 14 years, and starting with David Cameron, and through 14 years, the military was systematically stripped. And I have to say, and we might disagree on this, but we'll remain friends, I am completely with Donald Trump. I think it is extraordinary. Whatever you make of some of the stuff he does is bonkers, and I accept that. But in 30 short days, he has made the United Kingdom's Prime Minister commit to something that we should have committed to 15, 20 years ago. And there's no doubt the same will happen in Europe. My question is, why have successive governments stripped back? You'll say to me, because the world was a different place. But they must have known that by appearing weak, this was always likely to happen, Tobias.
No, I think there's more that allows us to agree than disagree. The difference is, between now and 10 years ago, that the threats were simply not there. And I'm afraid successive governments, and you're right to point to the Conservatives as well, have chosen to invest because of the pressure by the voting public that wants to see investment in domestic issues. Now, I believe, and I hope you'd agree with this, that if the British public were really informed about the threats that are coming over the hill, they would be demanding greater investment in our defences. But the trouble is that people vote on the politicians actually support where the money wants to go. So if there's calls for education, calls for money for health and so forth, transport, that's where the money goes. If more of the British population were calling out to their own MPs, I recognise now that this is a different era of insecurity, that we are vulnerable, that we need to invest more in defence, then there'd be greater hollering inside the House of Commons to say that's exactly what we need to do. Come on, Treasury, find that money. So this is the bigger wake-up call. This is the challenge that we now face, is to find that money and repair the vulnerabilities and the shortfalls that you rightly now point to. And yes, it's Donald Trump that's focused on America time and time. He did this in Trump 1.0, by the way, turning to the Europe and indeed Britain and saying, listen, you've been sort of freeloading a little bit on America, looking after European defense. That's going to no longer happen. My concern now, though, is that he's now schmoozing up, I'm afraid, to President Putin. He's the arch enemy in Europe, as you and I have spoken many times. And he now seems to be supporting Russia more than Ukraine, blaming Russia blaming Ukraine.
But hold on a second. But
and that's a huge concern for me.
Zelensky's due in Washington, D.C. I'm not sticking up for Trump in each and every way, and some of what he does and how he does it leaves many people cold. But in the space of 30 days, a week ago he called Zelensky a dictator. Friday, Zelensky's in the White House signing the minerals deal. It seems to me that the bluff and bluster of Donald Trump has brought all sides to a reality, whether it's about the war or defence spending or whatever. I mean, there's the reality. I mean, people were saying yesterday, well done, Keir Starmer. Some would say it was appeasing America. Just to go back to what we started with before we finished, the Chagos Islands, to me, one of the most disgraceful things any government could do, quite while we're giving £9 billion away. I'll have a little bet with you, and you're not a betting man. It won't be the same when he flies back from America. Trump won't have that. Starmer will absolutely be his poodle again over this. I believe that Starmer has been shown, as has Macron to a degree, that Trump is calling the shots right now. And I'm not saying that Trump is an ideal human being, but he's made more moves in 30 days, and we've talked about it for 3 years, than any of them, hasn't he?
Well, you're right to say that has prompted greater defence spending. My concern is the bigger picture when you add up that vote at the United Nations, where America sided up with Belarus, North Korea, and so forth. And we're now seeing potential tariffs on Europe as well, that there's a much more contractual relationship developing with Europe, that America will dial back its security interests because it wants to focus on China and elsewhere. And that this deal that you mentioned as well with Ukraine, nothing about security, no mention of security there. That's actually about Ukraine being able to continue to be able to pay for a potential war against Russia. That's why it needs to sell its minerals. Nothing to do with actually supporting a country, a sovereign country that's been invaded by a dictator.
Really interesting. Tobias, it's always good to have you on, my friend. Really, really good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. Tobias Ellwood, former chair of the Defence Select Committee, ex-MP. Will he be back in 4 years? We'll see. One thing is for sure, you've got 12 minutes to get your call on if you want to be part of Drive between now and 7. 0344 499 1000. You can ring or send a WhatsApp voice note. And don't forget, from 7 o'clock for our second night, live and exclusive Premier League football tonight. Liverpool-Newcastle, courtesy of TalkSport on Talk. Live commentary from Anfield. Massive game. Liverpool 11 points clear. Newcastle trying to get in those Champions League slots. If you want to watch Kev O'Sullivan, though, do not fret. His programme on from 7 on Talk's YouTube channel and Smart TV. This is Talk.
Yeah, we're not talking about defence and military expenditure, but I think his speech yesterday was weak, pathetic, certainly not enough, wrong timeline, and actually mendacious, because he was actually talking about figures that he was manipulating figures, massaging the figures. The actual sort of fiscal benefit to the defence budget isn't anything near what he's trying to make out.
We were really sort of quite surprised and, well, maybe not surprised, but certainly shocked and disappointed to see that when you take things in the round, this year's mayoral budget is spending more on climate and net zero related measures than it is on policing. Now, the mayor has said in his press releases that nothing is more important to him than keeping Londoners safe. Now, we obviously disagree.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Talk Drive for 10 more minutes. Don't forget that live and exclusive Premier League action courtesy of TalkSport. On here from 7 o'clock, Liverpool, Newcastle and Kev O'Sullivan's Political Asylum from 7 o'clock on Talk's YouTube channel and your smart TV. Mike Graham's at home having meatloaf. The beauties of television mean he recorded this earlier. I want you to understand that the man who is at the heartbeat of this radio station and TV station, who is always working, wants to give you £25,000.
Time's running out to get involved in our 25 grand competition. Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to win this life-changing amount of money for 2025. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that, but time is running out. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Prize. What number, right? Prize to 83 what? 83. Why can't... Can I... I'm going to give it... 0344 499 1000. Text to 87222. This is Talk Drive. So that's your way you can win £25,000. You got the football at 7, or Kev on the YouTube channel, sounding great. You got Mike tomorrow morning. We'll get some more calls in the tick. Ben's in Plymouth. Jezza, it's like Starmer is a proper commie. He does everything he can to hurt our country. I can't stand him or his inept cronies. Ben, here's the thing from an old man. I could have told you he was a commie. He's a proper socialist, mate. We need him out, but that's not going to happen. Graham Pack. For net zero, with all these costs of going green with heat pumps and electric cars, you will end up with net zero in your bank account and probably going into the red. I like that. From green to red. You see what we did. In London is Kirsten. A very good evening. Welcome to Talk Drive, Kirsten.
Hey, how are you, Jeremy?
I'm all right. How are you? Whereabouts in London?
Chiswick.
You had to think about that, didn't you? You had to think about
Well, I'm on a border with Chiswick and Acton, so yes, but I am.
You're on the border of the border of Chiswick and Acton. That's much better.
And Mike, I know Mike doesn't like Chiswick, so
I disagree with Mike. You're much better to be Chiswick side of Acton. Oh, Acton, I'm joking. All lovely places. What do you want? No, I love it all. What do you want to say, sweet?
So, I come from Honduras. We've spoken about how difficult it was to come here on a spouse visa and all that. So the problem that I have with Ed Miliband is that he really doesn't understand that people in countries like mine in Honduras are not worried about carbon emissions. They're worried about putting food for 8 people in one table with less than £1.
Yep.
And he's lecturing people here who already have problems, and whatever we do in the UK is not going to save the world, because it's less than 2% of the emissions here, isn't it?
I think it's such a good point, and this sort of quest, this ideological quest to lead the world, there are major powers who release far greater carbon emissions, who are taking no responsibility at all. And that's why I think so many of us believe, Kirsten, that it's a fad. It's something these people believe in, and they won't listen to the other side of the argument. And I'm with you. And the other thing is, you talk about your country of Honduras, and that's a really interesting reality, and people should understand that. But I also think, and I tread carefully, the people of this country are also facing hardship, not like you do in Honduras, but they are struggling in this country. And I believe that that money could be much better spent on things that matter to tax-paying Britons, the length and breadth of this country. I really do.
Absolutely. The thing is that back home, we don't see that reality, you see.
No.
I had to come here to realise that there was poverty here in the UK. I used to work half a block from the White House when I lived in the States.
Yes.
And people are sleeping on the floor, on the streets. And unless you see it, you would think that everything is amazing and bright because of the movies. It isn't. So there is poverty. It's a very different kind of poverty. I've seen homeless people read on a what do you call those tablets?
Yes.
You would never have that back in my country, of course.
No.
But it is a different kind of poverty, and it is. Yes, it's great that he wants to save the world if that's what he wants to do. But the reality is, it's not going to work the way he wants. He needs to focus on finding a way to mitigate the emissions, technology or something.
Yeah, I agree.
Not telling us to stop eating and a third world country.
Apparently I can't eat meat, I can't have dairy, I've got to have an heat pump, and I've got to drive an electric car, which depreciates in value, and I can't bloody well insure. I like a burger, I like yoghurt, and I'm not going to be told that my house has to be cold, so you can shove it up his backside. Kirsten in London, we love you, we love Honduras, thank you very much indeed. Ryan has just said to me, can we please go to Kev? So I'm going to another... No, I'm not. How are you?
Jeremy, I'm very, very well.
No, are you? I know. Listen, I know. Fulham winning last night.
Ah, come on.
But it must have been difficult for you, doing a great show and then wondering how Fulham were getting on.
Well, actually, I was in a very good mood from a very early stage because Sam, our excellent technical operator, told me that after less than a minute we were 1-0 up.
So I'm sorry about this. I'm trying to put something in the bin.
That's all right.
Mate, what another day. What another day. The BBC are literally up to their necks in Maya, aren't they?
Interesting you say that, because at 8 o'clock, the man who broke the story about the Gaza documentary, the fact that it was a Hamas guy's son. No, the guy who broke the story was David Collier.
Of course it was.
The Sun just picked up on it like everybody else. So David Collier is coming on after we learned today that 500 absolute idiots are now calling, including Gary Lineker, are calling on the BBC to reinstate this documentary because it's an important piece of journalism. It's not journalism, it's propaganda.
It is propaganda, and they've whitewashed. Have you seen that today? They've changed phrases, taking out your hood. I mean, it's extraordinary.
We've got that all recorded. We're going to show exactly how they did it.
And you know when they said, oh, I don't think it was us, the production company, we need to talk about due diligence. What, you mean they didn't know? This is a cover-up, by the way. This is an appalling example.
They literally said that, don't forget, the chronology of this was that they reluctantly apologised when it was revealed by David Collier, my guest tonight, that this kid, the narrator, was the son of the Deputy Agriculture Minister of Hamas. By the way, he's not... they don't have any agriculture in Gaza. He's Deputy Chief Tunnel Digger, isn't he? Or something like that.
I can't imagine he's in charge of irrigation.
Yeah, but the chronology of it. So they apologise, and then people like me and you going, come on, pull this down. This is a disgrace. No, we're leaving it there. And they just put a sort of proviso on saying, just to let you know, there's a Hamas connection here. They finally shamefacedly pull it down on Friday, saying we're taking it off the iPlayer for due diligence. The due diligence they should have shown before they ever put the documentary on.
Mate, you're telling me. And also, here's something very quickly for you.
Yep.
So